Trustee Lowe.
Present.
Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Rogan.
Present.
Trustee Miller. Trustee.
Present. Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yes, ma'am. Trustee Caravas
Present.
and Trustee Waugh.
Please all rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America,
the
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
We take a reflective moment of silence at this time. Let's keep in mind the victims and their families of COVID, our neighbors who were the victims of the Marshall Fire, and all the men and women in our armed forces. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Are there any requests from any trustees to amend the agenda at this time? Mayor Pro Tem Browning?
No, but I have a preliminary question of the town attorney. At a, I guess we would call it a preliminary session, setting out the process for hearing this application. There was a motion made and seconded and discussed and voted on to recuse Trustee Miller due to her status as a contractor for Planet Bluegrass, and that motion failed on the 3-3 vote. Will that prior session be a part of the overall record of this application, or to deal with that issue, is it necessary to resurrect it, or can we adopt that prior session by reference? Or just procedurally, I was wondering how best to.
If you want a part of the record of this proceeding, I think you'd have to resurrect it now. We can't incorporate. I mean, you can state for the record what happened if you want, I guess, or you can resurrect your motion to force recusal. I think those are your two options.
I'd rather not take the time and go through that process again if we don't have to. So to get it on the record, is it sufficient simply to state what happened?
I think that this should be sufficient to reflect in the minutes of this meeting.
Okay. At what point would it be appropriate to do that?
It's a good question. I think probably when we open up the first item, we can address that then.
Okay. Thank you.
And we'll do that prior to any staff presentation, just saying that.
Interrupt the rest of it.
Okay.
Trustee Miller has her hand raised.
Trustee Miller?
I just have a question for Attorney Dittman as well, along the same lines. Do I need to state my position again as well?
I would, and so I think maybe the order is to streamline this. This is being brought up now. The clerk will read the first title, the first item into the record. Trustee Miller, you can make your disclosures that you wish to make if you do still wish to do so. Mayor Pro Tem Browning, you can put into the record your previous objection, and then from there we'll do a staff report and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any further questions? If not, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yeah.
and Trustee Caravas.
Aye.
The agenda is approved unanimously by the board. Madam Clerk, could you please read the first general business item into the record?
Yes, item 1 is a public hearing on resolution 2022-19, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving or denying an application submitted by Planet Bluegrass LLC for a conditional use amending an existing conceptual plan and related keynotes for 19680 North St. Vrain Drive, Planet Bluegrass Farm.
Okay. I was a little confused. This is a public hearing, Counselor?
Yes, the first two items, the two conditional use resolutions are public hearings, as is the annexation agreement, second reading.
Okay, thank you. Staff report?
Yeah, so before we begin the staff report, I think Trustee Miller was going to give her disclosures, and then Mayor Pro Tem Browning enter in his
Trustee Miller?
record.
You're recognized.
Yeah, so
Trustee.
I'll just disclose that I have worked for Planet Bluegrass in the past, and I can remain unbiased in this decision moving forward.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, at a prior meeting, and I forget the date, but it was roughly 3 weeks ago. There was a meeting about the Planet Bluegrass application, and the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the procedures that would be and timing of that would be utilized in dealing with that application. At that meeting, a motion was made and seconded to basically disqualify Trustee Miller from participating in the deliberations due to her status as a paid contractor for Planet Bluegrass. Discussion was had. It's not the first time this topic has been discussed. A vote was taken. The vote was 3-3. And under our procedures, if a motion is made and it's a tie vote, the motion fails. And I believe that the same 6 trustees are present tonight who were present at that session. And so rather than go through that whole disagreeable process again, simply wanted to put that in the record. I don't see any reason to repeat the same thing with the same people here. Should any of the trustees on either side of that wish to change their vote, I guess they could so state in the record. But I think that it is important, particularly if there is a close vote, that prior discussion and vote be reflected in the record. So that's my summary of it.
For the record, I'm not prepared to change my vote on that particular item. Would any other trustee wish to comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. Town staff report.
Yeah, just quickly before I start things off here with my process presentation, Trustee Miller, would your disclosure you gave here on this item tonight also be applicable to all the other items on the agenda regarding Planet Bluegrass?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So you gave a disclosure regarding your previous employment with Planet Bluegrass, and you mentioned that you believe that is de minimis and that you can remain unbiased. Would you make the same disclosure if you don't have to do it again for every other item? Would you do this to make the same disclosure for every other item on the agenda concerning Planet Bluegrass?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no further preliminary matters or disclosures by the Board of Trustees, I think I'm going to kick it off with a process presentation, mostly for the benefit of the public, but also as a reminder to the Board of Trustees about how these conditional use quasi-judicial public hearings will be conducted, since they're the first two up on the agenda. Victoria, do you want to share that, or should I share that?
I'd ask Dolores if she would.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
If that's too difficult, I can.
Nope, I've got it.
Okay.
I don't want to make it any more complex. There's already a lot of documents here.
How's that?
It would be the other one with the process.
The PowerPoint.
Oh,
We'll have that. We'll have that one next.
That'll be next, yeah.
okay.
There you go.
That one?
This one.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you wouldn't mind putting it in presentation mode, and advancing
Where
to
is
the slide. You can either press F12 or there's that little button up there. Looks like a slideshow, upper left. You can press that too. Oh, not that one.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No,
You're
you're
okay.
fine.
You're
See
okay.
where,
Just
see where it says, see where it says like save up in the upper left-hand corner? It's like 2 buttons to the right. Okay, there you go. Next one.
This one?
Next
one
one.
more. One more. There you go. Nope.
There
That
you
one.
go. That one.
There you go. If you go to the second slide.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. One more. There you go.
Okay, so thank you for being here tonight, everyone. Just a quick update on the process for this. I know you've seen similar slides for the multiple quasi-judicial processes we've had to do recently, but for any public here tonight, I want to just kind of explain how we're going to do this. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding which attaches with it certain due process requirements, which means we have to be pretty strict on how the process is conducted. So that no one is surprised about how that process will be done. I just wanted to go over that. So for each of the items on the agenda that are quasi-judicial matters, this is the process for the public hearing will be conducted. So that is the conditional use for the farm, the conditional use for the ranch, and then finally the annexation agreement. The other 2 items, the resolutions, the amending the ALUs, are not public hearings. They're simply resolutions like the town would approve a contract. So those don't have public hearings attached to them. So for the public hearing matters, we'll start off with the staff report. At the conclusion of the staff report, the Board of Trustees can ask any questions of staff. We should try not to delve too much into discussion or your opinion on the application, but limit it to questions for staff. Following that, we will have an applicant report and presentation. Again, ask questions for applicant. After that, try to limit the amount of discussion. You should really wait until all the evidence is in before you make any sort of conclusion regarding the application. Following that, if we have any further questions of either staff or the applicant, we can do that. We will then proceed to the public comment. For the public that's in attendance, if you submitted written correspondence, that has been included in the agenda, as you've probably seen. It has been distributed to the Board of Trustees and is included as part of the written record. You don't need to speak if you submitted an email or other written correspondence. However, if you wish to, you're of course welcome to. We just ask you to keep it as brief as possible, given the amount of discussion we're probably going to have here tonight. Just general reminders on public comment. Please state your name and physical address of residence for the public record. PO boxes are not appropriate. We need to know where you live, whether it's in town or not, and that includes your physical address. Please direct your input to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees are the decision makers, not staff, not the applicant. Any sort of disparaging remarks to the applicant or staff are prohibited. The staff, applicant, or Board of Trustees will not directly respond to your input during the public hearing. However, the board may choose to direct certain questions to either the staff or the applicant during their deliberations and it's part of the questions and response of the applicant. So, of course, the next step is the applicant will have the opportunity to respond to any public comment, to give any final comments on the application. And during this stage, the Board of Trustees may ask that the applicant respond to questions of the public or staff do the same. Once the applicant has given their final word, if you will, on the application, we will close the public hearing. At that point, all evidence has been submitted into the record. Then begins the Board of Trustees discussion, and like any other Board of Trustees action that requires a motion and a second to begin discussion. The BOT has 3 options: approve the conditions, or deny. The next slide is actually a carryover. The next bullet point is a carryover, so don't worry about that one. And so I want to also provide for the Board of Trustees and for the public that there is a very specific review criteria for a conditional use process. I've listed them here. I'm not going to read them in great detail, but the Board of Trustees decision making needs to be really rooted in these decision criteria that are in 16.730. And so they're pretty broad. They cover a broader range of topics. However, if the board decides to approve or deny or approve conditions this application, that decision must be rooted back in these review criteria. So keep that in mind. The evidence that you're allowed to consider is that presented during the public hearing. That means the packet and all materials presented, which from both staff and the applicant. It also means public comment, questions and answer with the applicant and staff, and those sorts of things. And just as a final sum up, the Board of Trustees is not authorized to make a decision on factors that are not contained within the review criteria with regard to the conditional use processes. And so that is it in terms of the process portion of how the conditional use hearing will be conducted. If you have any questions on that before we get into the staff report, I'd be happy to take those at this time.
Questions for Council Mayor Pro Tem?
Attorney Dittman, you said there are three options: approve, deny, or approve with conditions. Is there or is there not an option to, depending on evidence presented and answers to questions, to continue this to a date certain before a final decision is made?
That's correct, Mayor Pro Tem. There's always the option of the Board of Trustees to continue an item to a date certain. So that's also on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Trustee Lowell?
Yeah, Attorney Dittman, is there going to be a public hearing on every one of these resolutions and then the ordinance at the end?
So just the two conditional use processes and then the annexation agreement ordinance. They're separate items. They require a separate public hearing on each one. The two ALUs resolutions do not require a public hearing because they're just plain old resolutions pursuant to those agreements that are approved like any other contract, which means they do not have an associated public hearing unless the board decides to open for public comment on those items.
And I have one more question.
Yep.
In Phil Strom's or Director Strom's notes on the conditional use review, he notes that it says that the associated keynotes for the farm and the ranch will be part of the approval for the conditional use review.
That's correct.
So then at the ordinance, at the end of all this, if we choose to make changes to the keynotes, that's a separate action?
No, so it is very confusing, and we'll kind of go through this with the staff report as well. But the two conditional use approval resolutions are for the site plan and the associated keynotes. And so if you have any sort of changes to the keynotes you would like to make, it need to be done as part of that process. The annexation agreement is just really the body of the annexation agreement. And then the various other pieces are attachments to the annexation agreement.
All right, so just so I'm clear, if I wish to make changes to the keynotes, they need to be done under the conditional use review. And
Correct.
then at the ordinance at the end is more or less just window dressing.
The ordinance at the end is for the body of the annexation agreement itself. And so if there's anything then you'd like to change in the body of the annexation agreement itself, that is the ordinance. That is the last item as part of the agenda. Confusing.
We'll muddle through. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm here to help. And I understand it's very confusing. It's for two different properties and 5 different documents, but we're going to try our best to keep them straight. The first one we're doing, the conditional use, is for the farm property, and then we'll do the ranch, and then continue on from there. Okay, with that, I think we can. Do you want to pull up the staff report, Victoria?
Yes, I'm doing that now.
Okay.
Staff reports. Is the staff report showing?
It is.
Okay. So as was alluded to, this original staff report was drafted by our Director of Community Development, Philip Strom, who is on vacation this week. And so we are going to muddle through this, but we do want to, and we'll help the board as we go through each of these, but we want to go through the staff report. It is going to combine all of the issues. And so then we'll break them down as we go through, and if we need to readdress or bring up maps or attachments, we certainly can do that. But it is a fairly lengthy staff report. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm assuming you've read it, but for the sake of the public as well, they can see what's included in this staff report, all the different areas. And basically tonight, you're going to hear multiple requests from Planet Bluegrass that they are asking for your consideration tonight. And those will happen as as it has been alluded to, 2 resolutions regarding conditional use review that will have a public hearing, 2 resolutions with for amendments to the amendable letters of understanding, referred to as ALUs, and then an amendment to the annexation agreement for the Planet Bluegrass Farm, which will be the second reading and public hearing. So again, we're going to break these into 3 different areas. Conditional use review. These are going to be the recommended actions based on Planning Commission and staff review of the documents. And it feels kind of an awkward placement, but we're following our standard staff reporting form. So Planning Commission and the staff, according to review of the Lyons Municipal Code, do recommend the approval of the application with conditions that you will see as outlined in the resolutions. 1, to approve the revised site plan and associated keynotes for the farm, and 1, to approve the revised site plan and associated keynotes for the ranch. In regard to the amendable letters of understanding, we will be considering 2 resolutions, again, 1 for the farm site and 1 for the ranch site. And then lastly, the ordinance amending, again, the Planet Bluegrass Annexation Agreement. Background information for those who are not familiar, there's 2 addresses, one at 500 West Main Street, which we call the ranch. The other is at 19680 North St. Vrain Drive, which is called the farm. Both are zoned commercial entertainment, CE1 zoning district, owned by Planet Bluegrass LLC. The next couple slides show the 2 properties. The one on the left here is called the farm. The one that was the original Planet Bluegrass festival site is called the ranch. Here's another close-up of the farm. Take note where the St. Vrain Creek bisects this property, because this becomes the south grazing area that you're going to be referring to. You can see my cursor. This is the original property referred to as the Planet Bluegrass Ranch. This is showing the zoning district as CE1. So in regard to the documents you're going to be looking at tonight, there are basically 5 documents, not including the amendments, that control the use of the ranch and the farm properties. They go back to 1999 for the ranch, and that's the site plan and keynotes, and the amendable letter of understanding for the ranch property. And then most recently in 2017, when we annexed the farm property, and keynotes to the site plan for the farm, and the amendable letter of understanding for the farm. Each of the above categories of documents has a unique process for amending it, which creates some of this complex action tonight. The first is that we must follow a conditional use process for amending the site plans and related keynotes. And due to the complexity of these 2 documents, each of them contains keynotes which describe restrictions and uses on those properties, and amending those require a conditional use process.
And something important to note with regard to that action in particular is that the ranch property does not say specifically how to amend the keynotes, but the farm property very clearly states as a conditional use process. So we've agreed with the applicant that both should be done the same way. And one of the conditions of approval that we would like to request, if granted, is that we harmonize those 2 by requiring them both explicitly to be conditional use processes.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. In regard to the amendable letters of understanding, an amendable letter is a requirement of the CE1 zoning, which covers both of the properties, as we noted. The amendable letter is basically an understanding between the applicant and the town that specify further details regarding the entertainment to be provided in that zone. Okay, that hopefully will help. Both the farm and the ranch have an amendable letter, and both will require separate resolutions to amend those. On June 8th of 2017, the board approved ordinance 1015, which approved the annexation agreement. And so that's the next process we'll be dealing with. And this refers only to the farm property. So the property that was on the left of the highway when we were looking at the map. This can only be amended by a written agreement between the town and Planet Bluegrass. And because it was originally adopted by an ordinance, can only be amended by an ordinance, which includes a public hearing tonight. So this is an overview, a summary of the proposed changes that Planet Bluegrass is requesting. And they are hoping that these will meet their needs for the site for the next 10 years. And again, I don't need to read these to you, but basically it includes the farm south grazing area to be able to be used for major event camping and storage. Relocating the temporary pedestrian bridge that has been in place for the last few years during festivals. The addition of a permanent vehicular bridge connecting the main property to the south grazing area. Additional storage facilities, an accessory dwelling unit intended to house their staff, and a commitment not to use it as a short-term rental. Increasing mid-tier events at the ranch to a maximum of 3,000 attendees with a maximum of 10 events. Utilizing the farm property for mid-tier events. Improvements to the ranch property to improve their operations. And then a ratification of keynote amendments toward the settlement agreement that was executed in 2021. That's an overview of the proposed changes. And then specifically, as we talked about, the site plans and the keynotes each have changes. And when we get to these actual items, I can bring up the maps that have the corresponding numbers to them. So on the farm site plan, you're going to see they're adding a bathhouse structure, front gate archway, some cattle sheds, this bridges we've talked about, a fence, all of the things we already kind of talked about. And on the ranch site, again, we'll pull it up as we talk about it. They want to convert their multi-purpose structure to a bathhouse and add gate structures and a yurt, move around some of their ticket offices, box offices, and the main gate would be moved to the north. Addition of a pavilion, renovations. You'll see all of these things on that site plan. Oh, and then, yeah, there's a couple extras up there. The addition of yurts and tiny homes and signage. On the farm keynotes, there is a significant change to include camping for up to 1,000 people in conjunction with their major events for a maximum of 12 days per year with no access from Apple Valley Road.
Victoria, can you speak to the items which were removed from the PCDC application? I think that's important to the Board of Trustees to know.
I think those come a little later here when we do that, but basically they there was originally a yurts planned on the farm site that they have removed. And but they do want to continue with a bathhouse on the farm site outside of the floodplain and the storage facility. And then on the ranch site, they removed, I believe it's the yurts, but I'm seeing they're here. It says up to 12 temporary yurts. Can you clarify that, Brandon?
We'll have to have the applicant clarify that.
Okay.
But,
Okay. But there were some, after the planning commission, the applicant did remove some of the areas of concern that the planning commission has, but I didn't want to complicate that with this quasi judicial actually. So I'm sorry, I didn't have that ready. In regard to the keynotes from the settlement agreement that was just approved in 2021, again, this is broken by ranch and farm.
Victoria, can I cover this one
Sure.
quickly?
Oh,
So-
sure, if you want to, the settlement
So-
agreement.
Yeah, so I'm not going to read through these, but the board I think remembers, but for the edification of the public, that there was a dispute between Planet Bluegrass and the town regarding compliance with the existing keynotes and ALUs. A settlement agreement was reached between Planet Bluegrass and the town. The ALUs, which came into via resolution, have already been changed to reflect the settlement agreement terms. We did that via resolution in the fall of 2021. Because the keynotes can only be amended via conditional use process, we never got around to actually amending those documents. So because the Planet Bluegrass has now come in to request other changes to those keynotes, we are also at this time also essentially ratifying those previously committed changes to the keynotes. And so those are reflected in the red lines. And I don't think we have to run through all these.
Okay, thank you. So this shows the ranch, and then there's the farm and the ranch and farm events. You want to cover this as well, Brandon, in regard to conditional use review?
I mean, I can. I mean, we're all kind of aware of the process. I think we've all kind of living it the past couple of months, but this was properly noticed to the homeowners on the 22nd. It was posted on the town website. We put it on the town's bulletin board. It went into the Times Caller in Longmont, and there was a PCDC meeting on the 24th for the conditional use processes. In addition, we also had, the other meetings regarding the process, which is more of a workshop, and then the meeting regarding the first reading of the annexation agreement. So we've had plenty of public process up to this point.
Under the agency referrals, I do want to comment one thing. As you can see, Lyons Fire Protection District, the engineer, the Utilities and Engineering Board, and CDOT all none of them had significant concerns regarding the proposed improvements. I do want to note that the Ecology Advisory Board did not get the referral packet in time to give their comments to the Planning Commission. So they did express concerns regarding some of the changes, and you are the first to review those as part of your comments. I do want to let you know that the applicant acknowledges receipt of those and is willing to hire the appropriate environmental people to address some of the issues, but they were not able to get that done in time for tonight's meeting. So do you want to note that? The rest of the memo really goes through what is the criteria for review of the conditional use process and the staff's evaluation of how it meets each of those sections. Again, unless you want me to go through them, overall, they find that goals are met. They've cross-referenced those to the comprehensive plan goals, economic development goals, cultural history and education goals, environmental goals, transportation goals. And then we get down to the public utilities. And I do know that Director Kaplan is here. And he and the Utility and Engineering Board have identified that this can be adequately served by town utilities, but they do have a few requests. One of those is for a full utility report by a professional engineer, a drainage report, storm drainage report, projected water use calculations to confirm that a 3/4 inch tap is adequate for the farm property. And as part of your packet, you should have received both Planet Bluegrass. They did identify how much water they feel they will use and feel they can stay within the 270,000 gallons per year. And then sewer loads, it is noted that we can meet the needs of the sewer. However, it should be noted that the lift station that this will be going through is almost 30 years old. And we may have to come up with plans of what would happen if that were, to fail, of course. No concerns from the fire protection district. And then actually the traffic impact is still workable because the 29 event days per year does not exceed their current limits. So this is a description of all of the different needs that are met. And then there is this is the recommended conditions of approval. And I already went through those with you. Here's a summary of alternatives, and it was noted there is one other, and that could be to table or continue tonight's meeting. And I do want to talk a little bit about the annexation agreement and the water rights dedication.
Which does tie back into the other items as pursuant to the requirement of the town adequately serve with utilities. So
as of right now, the annexation agreement, there is a section 19 that says the required dedication and transfer is 1 acre-foot of water per acre of land annex, which is almost 25 acres. And continues to say that it's determined by calculating the water use demands. And in this case, there's quite a conflict between the demands that can be met by 1 tap and 25 acre-feet of water that could be required. And as you can see, they are saying they can meet it. They are specifically requesting not to dedicate those acre-feet. And that is part of their request at this time, since it was not required at annexation. In regard to wastewater, there's also a code that says if you are located within 400 feet of the property to a municipal sewer line, you must connect, but they were not required to at the time of annexation. Director Kaplan and staff have talked about this. In rural settings, it could also, as part of that code, it also refers to a building being within 400 foot, which in this case, the house is not within 400 feet. The applicant agrees that if they build a bathhouse on this property, they will connect to municipal sewer, but would like to waive that until it is built, as the current house doesn't need more than the septic system that it's currently on.
So with regard to the annexation agreement and the other items specifically, and a condition that would be required if the board agrees with the approach proposed by Planet Bluegrass is it'll have to be conditional upon a future resolution of the Board of Trustees waiving the dedication requirements at this time, and or future application for water rights of some kind, because currently the agreement reads that they do require to dedicate water upon either subdivision, which is not applicable here, or a modification of the conceptual plan, which very clearly is at issue here. And so any sort of approval to the annexation agreement or the conditional use for the farm property will have to be conditioned upon a future approved application of the board waiving those water rights or somehow modifying them within the annexation agreement.
So that is a synopsis of the staff report. And if you're ready to move forward, I will stop sharing my screen so that we can start talking. And if you want me to bring up other documents, I had to figure out where that's at. Oh, there it is. If you want me to bring up other documents as we talk, I certainly can do that since there are numerous attachments.
And if there are no questions at the time too, we can also proceed to the applicant.
Yeah, that's what's number 2 on the process.
Yeah. If there's any immediate questions right now, we can
Are
answer.
there any for staff or council? Trustee Lowell.
This may be a procedural question as well. Can I ask at this point of the staff about the articles or the keynotes, and if they feel that the substance of the keynotes are being honored? Is that appropriate at this time?
Yeah, I mean, this is the part of the meeting where we consider the keynotes for the farm property. And
Yes.
so at least the recommendation of Planner Strom is that they're being honored at this time.
All right, then I may ask a particular question of staff. Is the staff satisfied with the conditions of the Planet Bluegrass Farm keynotes, specifically keynote 5, referring to the south grazing area, as presently written, is being honored?
Can you read what number 5 is for me, please?
Do you want it in, okay, and it's.
I'll pull it up, but if you,
No,
I
no,
thought
I
you had it handy.
I can read that, Administrator Simonson.
Thank you.
Keynote 5 says south grazing area, wetlands, parenthetically 2.8 acres. This area shall be maintained for grazing and the accommodation of livestock and may be occupied by the owner or owners, invitees, or guests for non-commercial daytime leisure activities such as picnicking, fishing, and similar non-commercial activities, period.
You know, from what I understand, in talking with the applicant, they want to respect and will respect the wetland designation once it is identified. They feel it needs to be a little more surveyed of what is that area. As of right now, I know they pull vehicles off of Apple Valley. There's a little parking area there. But for the most part, I'm not aware that I believe they are honoring its intended use.
Well, then let me note that when I drove by there the last 2 days,
Right?
there are 4 shipping containers,
Oh,
piles of barrels, piles of material in the floodway.
boy. I was not aware of that.
Not hard to see. It's right on the boundary between DeBoom's property and the south grazing area.
Okay. That should not be allowed unless it was approved as a temporary use in the floodplain, unless it's out of the floodplain. So I guess I need. Okay, it's in it.
Excuse me for interrupting, but it is clearly in the floodway map of the town. Those 4 shipping containers are sitting in the floodway. They're not up by the road. They're not up by the road. They're down by the river. To my appearance, then, they are not honoring the keynote as written now.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
Any further questions to staff at this time? Trustee Logan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I have a question about CDOT. So in the packet on page 23, there's an email from CDOT saying CDOT is going to stick to the comment that the applicant needs to provide a new traffic study. And I know that there was a response from the applicant to CDOT, but I'm unclear about whether a new traffic study actually is being required. The traffic has changed considerably with the extensive increase in people going to Rocky Mountain National Park over the past couple of years and definitely since 2018. So do we know anything more about what transpired there?
I would, I'm trying to locate, because there's so many documents. We have the actual referral response from CDOT
Mhm.
in here. Is that what you're looking at? Or are you looking at the,
It was a string of emails.
here it is.
And
I found it.
it's, yeah, so it's on
I
page
found it.
23 of the packet.
Okay. My packet is set up just a little different. But
For
Is
the
it,
record.
can I help?
no, it's okay.
For the record, Madam Clerk, please note that Trustee Waugh has joined us.
23. Yeah, my number 23 is not that. I'd like to ask the applicant if they could respond to that.
Yes, I can respond to that. That was CDOT's original request from us. And in a meeting after that, we clarified that the new traffic study was only required if we were to exceed the 29 event days per year.
Yeah, that was in the staff memo. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
I would just like to ask, I understand event days, but there's also a reference to increasing attendance. So, I mean, there's and that would increase traffic. So I'm wondering if that is indeed somewhat of an incongruity. Yeah, you could say that there are only a certain amount of event days, but if you're talking about raising the attendance of mid-tier events from 1,000 to 3,000, that's going to create a lot more traffic. So, I'd like to delve into that a little more, perhaps after the applicant has a time to present their case. Any other questions, comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
I guess I have a process question. As the process was explained at the first of the meeting, the staff was going to do a presentation, the applicant was going to do a presentation, and then there were questions to the staff or the applicant. So I'm not real clear on what questions we should ask to staff now before the applicant has done their presentation versus what we should do later. I'm unclear.
If there's any very direct, I would say quick questions of staff that would help you understand before we move on to the applicant. I was just offering that right now. Otherwise, I think we can go on to the applicant. That may help illuminify some of your questions. But I understand that, it's a long presentation, so you may have something really quick. You just like, clarification on before we move on.
Okay, I'll try to do one quick question relating to the ADU that's proposed on the farm property. I have other questions about the ADU that probably are best directed to the applicant, but I do have a question that I'll try to keep short and to the point to the staff about that. Under the Lyons Municipal Code, section 161070, subsection C, it lists the zoning districts in which accessory dwelling units shall be allowed. And it lists them as R1, R2, R2A, E, EC, and A. So commercial entertainment -1 is not in that list. So quick question, since this zoning district is not listed among those in which an ADU can be located, how can staff recommend an ADU on this property?
I do recall looking at that with Director Strom before he left. You said EC versus CE?
Correct. EC is Eastern Quarter. It's not commercial entertainment. It's not. CE1 is not listed in the section in the code as a district in which you can have an ADU. So
good point. If that has not been updated, but good point. I'm like I said, unfortunately, I wish Mr. Strom was here because he's been doing all this staff research on this. Aaron, do you have an input?
Not specifically on that for the zoning, but just because this is more maybe a process question also, that we're looking at, to me, it was the conditional use. So the ADU, I don't know, was not being recommended. There are still a number of other things that might prevent an ADU. You need to have the homeowner living in the ADU. The ADU needs to be connected to the primary utilities first. But it was my understanding that it was more the condition. In general, from an overall perspective, are we okay with an ADU on this property if it meets all the other code? So that was all.
And that's the question, does it meet the code?
Yeah,
So maybe this will help too. And I didn't draft Planner Strom's report, but I think the purpose of the site plan and the keynotes is to identify the structures that are permitted. It doesn't grant the permission to put an ADU, just like it doesn't grant a building permit or a future bridge. And it says that on these locations, you could have these things. They're going to have to go through a separate process, including pulling a permit for an ADU, but they more than likely, if the code is the same as it is now, will not be able to obtain, as you recognize. But this would allow the structure to exist in that area. It wouldn't grant all the subsequent approvals they would need.
I don't understand, Attorney Dittman. You just told us that in order to approve this, we have to make a finding that it complies with the municipal code. It doesn't look like to me that it does. That's my question. How do we make that finding? And we can't make that finding based on some future building permit process. We need to make that finding now that it complies with the code. And that's my question. Given that ADUs aren't permitted in this district, how does it comply with the code?
yeah.
I mean, just one way to maybe reconcile, and this is for the board to decide, is that it complies with the code to the extent that any future approval for an ADU would have to comply with it. The codes exist at that time. I'm just offering it up there as maybe Planner Strom's thinking. I don't know.
Well, and maybe when the applicant does their presentation, if they've discussed that, because I remember him looking through that, and I'm surprised that. I wonder if there's been any update that we haven't been aware of that hasn't been codified.
We haven't. I'm pretty sure that we have not amended the zoning code to add that district.
Absolutely not.
Well, then I would agree with the attorney that it's similar to the bridges. They're listed here, but if they can't pass a no-rise certificate under the floodplain application, it won't happen.
Okay, it's not time for comments, but I would disagree that has anything to do with complying with the Lyons municipal code. You're talking about something entirely different than code compliance.
All right.
Anyway, just for the record, I don't want to get into too many questions now, but the very things that Utilities Director Kaplan mentioned, I'm going to have questions for the applicant about the other requirements for an ADU, not just that it be in particular districts. There are other things that would have to meet to be an ADU. So I'll save those questions until after the applicant presents.
Are there any further comments or questions by the board? If not, let's have the applicant present their report, please. State your name and address for the record, sir. Or ma'am.
While they're trying to unmute, it does appear there's a little conflict because the CE1 Entertainment District does allow on-site residence, business, and office space for staff, tenants, and owners. So I believe, that would refer to the primary residence. But I totally agree that we need to look into that.
Applicant?
Okay, yes, thank you. I'm Rosie Dennett, planning consultant for the applicant, Craig Ferguson. I reside at 210 Lincoln Street in Longmont. Also tonight we have Zach Tucker. Obviously, he's already spoken. He's the general manager of Planet Bluegrass. And then we also have our attorney, Justin Conrad from Hutchinson, Black and Cook. I just have a few comments, but I'm just going to hit this question immediately and then I'll get into the presentation. But we were kind of following staff's lead on this. Even though we've got separate hearings, public hearings, we're just going to do one presentation for you in the interest of time and not try to split it up and do all that craziness. So forgive me if we get into other things that might not be pertinent to the conditional use, but most of my comments are, and I think Zach's are too, but I just wanted to state that we're just going to do one presentation. Victoria is correct. When we talked to Philip about this, we didn't call it an ADU initially. And also under the regulations for that zoning district, it allows for additional buildings and uses that are accessory to the principal purpose of the district, so long as the buildings are included within an original or amended site plan. So we were calling it staff housing, and then it was suggested that an ADU is a little more familiar term. But so anyway, that's kind of how we got to where we started using that term instead, but I can understand Mayor Pro Tem's concern about that term. But I'm not sure that we wouldn't be able to do something still anyway. But that was kind of the discussion that we'd had with staff, but we obviously would have to work that out with staff before we could get any permits to do so. So regarding the presentation though, I've just got a few comments to make about the approval criteria for conditional use. And the latest referral comments that Victoria mentioned that we received after PCDC hearing. And then Zach's going to talk specifically about the proposed improvements, and he can talk a little more about some of the other questions that were asked. As you know, because of the board's approval last summer and some of some of the modifications to Planet Bluegrass's use, and then Riverbend recently indicating to Craig that they would prefer not to provide camping space for future festivals as it's been interfering with some of their wedding events. Amending the site plans for the ranch and the farm with the conditional use review became necessary. Since we needed to go through the review process, we also decided to include any improvements envisioned for the next 5 to 10 years and try to encompass it all into this one, all the past approvals into one, so it's easier for everybody to keep track of, to know what's allowed, and then hopefully we don't keep coming back every year with amendments. This proposal also does further the goal to keep most of the activities associated with the festivals on the two properties, the ranch and the farm. So moving the camping during the main festivals, only 12 days out of the year to the farm property does minimize those off-site traffic impacts specifically. Regarding the recent referral response from the Ecology Advisory Board, unfortunately, we did receive those comments approximately the same time that you received them in your packets. So we weren't able to provide you with a written response in time for your packets. But environmental sustainability is an important element of our operations. And so we certainly do appreciate the opinions expressed in that memo. We're currently working with a local wildlife biologist and a local wetland ecologist, both of whom live or work in Lyons, and both are familiar with the property. We are confident that we can proceed with plans to correctly delineate the small wetland boundaries in the south grazing area so that we can fence it off and protect it prior to commencement of the temporary camping during Rocky Grass Festival in July. Unfortunately, the EAB referral response was based on the original submittal and did not reflect the changes made at the PCDC hearing, which included the removal of the proposed year-round yurts and a bathhouse in that area. So I know Victoria mentioned a bathhouse, but that's on the north side of the stream. So we also originally had a plan for a bathhouse on the south side of the stream, and that has been removed. That commitment was made at PCDC, so it's a little confusing. Let's see, and again, no public vehicular access is going to be allowed off Apple Valley Road. So the campers will park on the north side of the farm and use a pedestrian bridge to access the camping area. That will, again, be used only for the 2 major events each summer. Additionally, some of the comments referred to Boulder County requirements, which aren't applicable. For example, town code setback requirements attached to the memo is a requirement for subdivisions, which this is not. But even having said that, we do appreciate the concerns that they expressed in that memo. So we will continue to work with these appropriate professional consultants to ensure proper protection is provided. As most of you know, this area was heavily damaged in the 2013 flood, and extensive and costly cleanup was necessary to remove large amounts of debris from the structures upstream, such as large appliances. Fortunately, the site has recovered well, and even though the wetland is now smaller than it was pre-flood, we are committed to keeping it in good condition, and we're confident, especially after talking with these professionals, that we can do that with their delineation efforts and with our fencing and other protective efforts. So overall, we are in agreement with town staff's and PCDC's finding that the proposal meets the approval criteria for conditional use as specified in the code. Specifically, the proposal meets all the applicable provisions of the zoning regulations and is in accordance with the Lyons comprehensive plan. Numerous comp plan goals and objectives are met, as was laid out in our report that's in your packet, as well as in the staff report, such as land use, economic, culture, history and education, environmental and transportation goals. And we're also in agreement with the conditions of approval recommended by town staff and PCDC. So I think I'll let Zach just go ahead and talk about more of the specifics and answer the other questions that were expressed. Zach?
Thanks, Rosie. So I guess y'all know me pretty well at this point, but I am Zach. I grew up in Lyons and I've been with Planet Bluegrass for about 11 years now, kind of in various capacities. I did start my full-time position at Planet Bluegrass in 2019, only to run face first into the COVID-19 pandemic. And so unfortunately, instead of getting to produce the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, I found myself issuing $2.5 million of refunds as our whole season just kind of fell apart. And so after the last 2 years we've gone through, I'm pretty excited to be looking toward a positive future here again. And a big piece of that is the 50th Rocky Grass coming up this summer. And that's a pretty major anniversary for us. And 30 of those last 50 years have occurred right here at the Planet Bluegrass Ranch at Lyons. So it's pretty exciting. And it's an anniversary that's rarely enjoyed in our industry. And so I think it speaks to a long history of us trying our best to be good neighbors, supporting the community, and providing cool opportunities to gather around world-class music. So like Rosie mentioned, it's way more confusing if we try to separate things. So I'm just going to approach this as a kind of the entire application, which goes across both properties and all of the documents, assuming that will be taken into account throughout the rest of the resolutions and things agreed upon here tonight. So with that, the reason that we're here, as Rosie had mentioned, is that we're not able to use Riverbend for camping in 2022. And camping is really an important piece of our festival experience, and it's imperative that we find a replacement for all the campers that were at Riverbend, especially as we approach our milestone anniversary here. So allowing for this camping at the farm is what spurred this process, but since we are here and amending these agreements, as we've already seen, it's a big process and very confusing to amend these agreements. So we wanted to anticipate as many things as possible that we could want to do or could look to do over the next few years here, so we aren't having to bring town staff and the town board into this process constantly. And so we've also adapted a lot over the last 2 years, and we've seen a lot of cool opportunities to try new things. For example, Springgrass last spring, and our first couple of large-scale single-day concerts occurred back in the fall of 2021. And so this really showed us that there's a lot of cool things that we can do at this property, and a lot of fun opportunities that we should be ready to explore in the future, as we might need to pivot. And this is all really timely, as Lyons is seeking its designation as an arts district, and we're all working to further embrace the arts and what it brings to our community. So in pursuit of our goals, I'm going to dive into some of the details of what we're requesting here tonight. And to do that best, I'm going to present our site plan so that we can all be on the same page. So let me share my screen here. So this is the ranch site plan. And the first update you'll notice is that it is a legible site plan, which is a big improvement from the original 1999 plan that is in the documents that cannot be read. So starting here, the most notable change, infrastructure to help improve our festivarian experience. Our primary pedestrian entrance has now shifted to that northwest corner of the ranch property with the addition of the farm. And so, a lot of our design was originally geared toward access down in the southeast corner of the property. So now we're having to shift it a lot as everybody is coming in from the farm. So we're seeking approval to build a new box office, which is number 44 up here, and then a new entrance and security structure, which is 39, and some fences to kind of help to delineate traffic. So most of these are purely to just help create a better experience. And then furthermore, we're looking for the ability to rebuild our bathhouse. It actually survived the flood. And just to clarify, it's called the multi-purpose structure in our original zoning because it hadn't been built yet. So we were just reclassifying that it is now built and it is called a bathhouse. And we just want the ability to do a full renovation and expansion if we would like to, because we're still working in this bathhouse with these toilets that survived the flood. So none of the requests within the ranch property are far outside of our existing uses of the property. We're really just trying to increase efficiency of our operations. The only one that might be a little bit confusing is number 21, and this is our Backstage Cabin. It's currently quite rustic and functions as our artist green rooms. We bring a lot of world-class acts here, and we want to update our facilities to match that level. So unfortunately, this cabin was not really originally designed to be an artist green room. So we're requesting the approval to renovate and expand this to add bathrooms where necessary and create more separated green room space and all of that. So you'll notice there's two different options there. And that is mostly to take into account potential floodplain concerns in the future. As we've stated, all of our requests tonight are pursuant to floodplain development permits and stuff issued in the building process. So we're trying to kind of maintain a certain amount of flexibility since we don't have concrete building plans or design plans at the moment. And so after discussions with the floodplain administrator, we've kind of created the opportunity to pivot the building out of the floodway based on the new maps, if that's deemed necessary. So that's kind of what those two drawings recommend or show in this image. Furthermore, we're requesting to be able to put up to 12 yurts or tiny homes back in this camping area. And again, these are intended to give us more flexibility as we have to work around floodway and floodplain concerns. And so the intent of these would also to serve as artist green rooms, especially in the short term if we're not able to complete a renovation of this cabin. A tiny home or a yurt could suffice as a green room in its place. There also could be offered as glamping during our events, which is gaining popularity. These would not be used as short-term rentals and would not be used outside of our event days. So they're purely intended for event use. So that's all of the notable items at the ranch, in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and shift to the farm at this point. And so starting with structures, structure number 7 is a new gate, and our intent here is kind of a ranch or farm style gate that is the archway that you see at a lot of ranches kind of out on the prairie. We think it is appropriate for the space and kind of helps not only as a wayfinding measure for people trying to attend, but it also kind of helps share what a cool space the Planet Bluegrass Farm really is. Additionally, we are requesting approval to build a bathhouse here. So the bathhouse allows the campers that we're already approved for on this north side of the river a place to shower and use facilities without us having to provide temporary porta potties. As we addressed at the Pcdc hearing, those can have smells and mess. And so anytime we can avoid that, we certainly like to do so. And so again, you'll notice two different placement options for this bathhouse, and those are as we drew the flood lines in, we wanted to have the option to go in the 500-year floodplain instead of the 100-year if the permitting was going to be better or easier to obtain at that point. So that's why those two options exist. We're not going to be building two bathhouses. As Victoria noted, we are also seeking approval for two bridges. The first one is number 14, which is this temporary bridge, and that would be placed across the river, ideally up near the south grazing area to allow people that are parking in the regular parking area access to their camp without having to travel along Apple Valley Road. So this bridge is a key piece of us managing the campground in a way that doesn't impact Apple Valley Road additionally. The other bridge, number 13, is a permanent bridge that could accept vehicle traffic. The intent for this is to be ranch and service vehicle traffic, not ever public traffic. So we're not going to use a bridge like this to allow public vehicles to the south grazing area or anything like that. It's purely to allow our service vehicles to move back and forth and allow easier access between properties. Additionally, the placement of these bridges is we're working with the floodplain administrator as well as our engineers to kind of discern the best place to put these bridges along the corridor in our property. So the arrows on the site plan are kind of meant to represent that they're likely to shift based on what engineering and floodplain says is going to be the best place to place these. So the actual placement in this image is purely just to show that they exist. So then finally, in the south grazing area, we are requesting to build an accessory dwelling unit. And as Rosie clarified, it was more meant to be a place for staff to live seasonally or for Craig to escape to or something like that. And so we adopted the ADU terminology later in the game, which probably led to some of this confusion, as well as a potential permanent storage facility to allow us to store things in a neat way and out of sight. So we would also like to put in perimeter fencing around this property, and that is not going to be privacy fencing, but it's going to be more of a loose mesh fencing that is, it's kind of referred to as livestock fencing. And this is much more about maintaining the barrier and the boundary. It helps us manage our camping, keeping campers from accessing the road, and keeping throughout the year, it keeps tourists and others from driving onto the property and trying to picnic and things like that, which is something we struggle with constantly throughout the year. And then just to reiterate this one piece, we were originally planning to do up to 5 yurts and a bathhouse in the south grazing area that would be a short-term rental, accessed year-round. And after some good conversations with our neighbors up in Apple Valley, we did kind of realize that this was a change in operation and probably out of the scope of what we wanted to be doing here and what we should be doing here. So we did remove these requests from our application at the Pcdc hearing. So that outlines most of the structures and changes that we're requesting. And now I'm going to pivot to some of the changes in use. And the biggest change in use is the approval to camp up to 1,000 festivarians in conjunction with major events at the farm and the ranch. So as Rosie mentioned, we're not able to camp at Riverbend in 2022. And so this is mostly intended to rehome those campers. And so I know that 1,000 campers seems like a big number. And I want to assure everyone that our intent is not to just drop 1,000 campers in there because that's what's been approved by the town board. We want to maximize our use of the space, of course, but we also don't want to create an uncomfortable experience for our guests or put any pressure on the boundaries, such as the wetland boundaries or the river or anything, or our neighboring property boundaries or anything like that. So our estimate of 1,000 campers comes from a rough square footage comparison of the available space here to available space in other camping areas that we have done throughout Lyons and Telluride. However, we recognize that festival camping is pretty fickle, and we don't have maximum camping space sizes. We don't limit how many tents people can set up or anything like that. So as a result, we will certainly be starting very small. Our intent for this year would be to sell probably 400 camping passes and use that to inform if we can and should increase or decrease in the future. And we would be there on site to decide, okay, is this, are people too cramped? Are we worried about implications on the wetlands or anything like that? And so we would certainly be building up to that. We may never end up getting close to that 1,000 campers if it's not actually practical. So we're not looking for that to be the end all be all here. And that's kind of where that logic came from. In terms of this camping, we're very aware of concerns about access and concerns from our neighbors in Apple Valley. And so we are placing a lot of conditions on this request. And so there's 5 big ones that we're placing. The first one would be no vehicle access to this campground. So all access is going to be on foot. Everyone is going to enter through the north end of the property and park where all the normal attendees park, and then walk across one of our bridges to their campsite. Secondly, we'll not allow any vehicle drop-offs on Apple Valley Road. So nobody will be allowed to even drive up, and even for a second. So the only vehicles that would be coming in from Apple Valley Road would be our trash or porta potty service vehicles or something like that. And then camping in this area would only be permitted with major events at Planet Bluegrass. So a major event is a strict definition in our zoning, of which we're only allowed 12 a year. So the maximum number of event days we would be camped here is 12 in any given year. However, I'll also note that at this point, we're only planning to use this campground for Rocky Grass in 2022, which would be 3 event days per year. So, we're seeking it to be tied to that major event number, but we don't have any intent to use it for that many in the coming year. Additionally, we'll mark off the sensitive wetlands on this property. And as Rosie mentioned, we've been speaking to ecological engineers and professionals, and they're going to help us delineate that to make sure that we get it right. And then finally, we will construct these fences that we're seeking approval for along the property boundary. And those are going to help keep campers from walking onto Apple Valley Road, which could be a potential traffic impact, and then also help to prevent people from trying to sneak in by driving the car down a little bit and tossing their stuff off to the side of the road. So those 5 conditions, as well as really strong staff management and signage, we're going to look at placing staff members at the entrance to Apple Valley Road and signs and things like that to really make sure that there's no impacts. We're really confident that we can incorporate these campers onto this property with really few noticeable impacts for our neighbors. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out from the farm and kind of look at our overall event uses. Our final major request is related to mid-tier events. And the concept of a mid-tier event was created during our previous agreements in 2021. And we're currently allowed 10 of these events, with up to 1,000 people at the ranch only. And since then, we've been really exploring these one-off concerts, as we call them, or events of different sizes and things that are different from our festivals. And we've kind of found that the 1,000-person capacity is really difficult to make work from a business perspective. It takes a lot to turn our venue on, per se, a lot of staffing, just because we have so many gates. We're not the type of venue that puts a chain link fence around everything to make security easy. So it takes a lot to have our venue running, even if there's only 1,000 people in attendance. So what we found is that a capacity of 3,000 people is much more workable for us as a kind of a mid-tier. And this allows us to still bring world-class acts, but also be sustainable from a business perspective. And so to accommodate this, we do need to park people at the farm in conjunction with these events. However, there would be no use of the south grazing area with these. So that is still only with major events. And as part of this, we would want to increase the notice for mid-tier events. It's currently 7 days, and we would want to increase that up to 30, since these are larger events with the potential to be more impactful. So what would these look like? Most commonly, they're going to be single day concerts with music beginning at 4 or 5 p.m. and guests all leaving by the end of the night. We want to keep the option open for camping related to these, but most of them are just going to be one-night shows. And I think they create a really cool opportunity for the business community. Since attendees aren't drawn to spend the entire day inside the event grounds, I can see them spending the afternoon shopping and eating in Lyons and then coming into the festival grounds at night. On top of that, we can open our parking lot early in the day, so all the attendees can come park, and then they can go patronize the local business in town without increasing the parking situation that we've already been discussing is pretty tight. So if you combine 12 major event days with 10 mid-tier event days, that's a total of 22 event days at a large scale. And so are we realistically going to use 22 event days a year? Probably not. Weddings already take up most of our weekends, and we already only use half of the major event days we're allowed. Our goal here really is to create some flexibility. We've learned the importance of being able to pivot over the last couple of years, and so we're trying to set ourselves up to be ready, as well as pursue cool new opportunities. And one thing that we've learned is that these opportunities can fall into our lap with not a whole lot of notice. So the one thing that we like is the 30-day notice of the mid-tier event versus the 120-day notice of a major event. When we were originally discussing back in 2021, we thought that 120 days of notice would be challenging for us to pull off an event within that time. And we've since learned that there's been lots of opportunities that have dropped into our lap in far less time than that. So the 30-day notice is a helpful piece of that helps us put together these events that have far fewer logistical concerns than a festival would. And then additionally, since the mid-tier events are designed to be self-sufficient between our two properties, when we label an event as that, the town really has a better idea of what to expect. The residents know what to expect. They know that they don't need to worry about impacts on their parks and things like that, as well as businesses can be more ready to take advantage of this because most of them are going to have that different structure that I discussed that could likely be much more conducive to people spending time and money in town. So that's the other kind of big change. A couple little other changes throughout the documents. In the amendable letters, we just did a lot of language cleanup. Much of it was things that were previously agreed upon. And what I believe would be the only notable thing is our request to move our weekday curfew from minor and mid-tier events to 10 p.m. And the weekday is defined as not Friday or Saturday. And the reasoning for this request for a 10 p.m. curfew is just because it doesn't get dark till 9 p.m. on those long summer nights. And we want to be able to incorporate a light show. That's kind of become a big piece of attending an event these days. And so if we have to end before it's dark, it's really hard to have that piece that's very important to not only the attendees, but also a lot of the artists now. And then shifting back to the farm documents, we sought to clean up a little bit of the wording around access and shift the governance of access to our CDOT access permits. And so this clarifies some of the questions brought up earlier. CDOT they're only concerned with keeping our high impact access days below 29 total. And so they clarify a high impact access day to include our school lineups, a Thursday load in and a Monday load out, even if it's just for 3 days of events in the middle. So they're looking at any day that has high impact, even if it's not defined as an event day. And so as a result, they would like to see a 29-day cap on event day, on high impact access days. And so really to simplify how this is written and interpreted, we've been seeking to change the way it's worded to say access to the property is allowed as governed by the CDOT access permits, but not to exceed 29 days per year. We think it's reasonable that CDOT should be the one that governs access, and by not trying to state different numbers in different places, we don't have to worry about confusion or someone reading one number and it not making sense in another place in the documents. And then finally, as Administrator Simonson brought up, we are requesting that the board adopt a resolution that waives the requirement for us to dedicate additional water at this update to our site plan. And this is because the proposed changes will not cause water use in excess of the existing tap on the property. I did provide a document in the packet that outlines our estimates for water use at the farm if we were to build both the ADU and the bathhouse. I purposely tried to pad these estimates as well to make sure that we would be safely within the 270,000 gallons a year that is allowed on our existing tap. I went ahead and matched the ADU use to what the house already does, which is probably excessive considering it would be a smaller dwelling. And I took the highest use days of the bathhouse at the Planet Bluegrass Ranch and added a little bit of padding to it, and then projected that for 3 months in a row at the farm to see how much we could expect the farm bathhouse to use. Now, it's notable that this farm bathhouse would only be used when we're holding events there. So obviously use in conjunction with parking is relatively limited. And at this point, we only camp at the farm for Rocky Grass, which is 3 days a year. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that my estimates for water use for this farm bathhouse are on the high side, and they're they're required to be tied to our limited event use already. So we aren't proposing to subdivide the property or drastically change the use, which is the intent of the code water dedication requirement. And waiving the requirement this time isn't precluding it from applying in the future, or if we were to plan to subdivide in the future. So you're not risking anything. And additionally, the town code does provide provisions that require dedication if our use estimates are incorrect and we end up using more than projected. We would have to dedicate at that point. So in summary, we hope it's a reasonable request to make, noting that our change in use doesn't require more water and that we aren't removing this requirement from future changes or a future intent to subdivide. And then finally, I wanted to speak to Trustee Lowell's comment about the shipping containers up on the south grazing area. We did shift some storage up there in 2020 and we're unaware of the changes to the floodplain mapping, as was our team that did our survey, as we were informed recently by the floodplain administrator that we still had the federal maps on even on our survey that was done. So we have since updated those, and the maps now do reflect the updated town of Lyons flood maps, but we were unaware of that. And so we will certainly make sure that we rectify that immediately with the floodplain administrator and have any of the correct permits that we need. So with that, I'm happy to provide any clarifications or answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant at this time? Trustee Lowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Tucker, thanks for the clarification on the shipping containers. I know they've been there for a while and we'll appreciate them when they're removed. I have a question on the map that you showed, the numerical keynote number 1 on the existing family residence with the attached garage. You're asking for a change in the keynote to indicate that a fence may be constructed around the residence to separate the yard from the other property uses. Has that fence been erected already?
So I'm looking at that right now. The fence had started to be erected and then I put a stop to it. Well, when I learned of it, the property owner got a puppy recently and they were trying to create a run for it and they started building the fence. And since we're going through this process and requesting it, I did put a stop to it. They got pretty darn far on it. So it goes about a quarter of the, or probably 3/4 of the way around the house before I was able to stop it. So we have paused that until this process is complete. So that was a mistake on our part and a miscommunication.
Okay, so you'll be asking retroactively for that fence in these changes to the keynotes, essentially.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? So am I to understand that the property in question, the farm, will only use parking for Rocky Grass?
Can you clarify that for me? Parking is allowed for, are you asking about parking or camping in the south grazing area?
I'm talking about parking. You
Okay.
made a statement that said that you were going to use parking this year specifically for only Rocky Grass.
Gotcha. So that statement was intended to refer to our use of camping in the south grazing area. At this point, we only have intention to use it for Rocky Grass, but parking, our intent would be to use it with all major events that we're currently approved for and then add the 10 mid-tier events.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. The south grazing area, the map wasn't as explicit as I would have liked, but does the river separate the south grazing area from the rest of the property?
Yes. Yeah, yes, it does.
And so I have a lot of concern in regard to the, I think it was the Ecology Board's recommendations. I think that those need to be addressed rather comprehensively, because that area between the river and Apple Valley Road, which I assume is the southern grazing area, is a very sensitive ecological area. If I know anything about ecology and animals and how they love to live around rivers. So I have a little bit of concern in regard to using that as a camping site as well, until the report from the experts that you indicated that you're communicating with in regard to, let's just call it out, an animal like the Prebles, a jumping mouse, have been finalized. I think it would behoove us all to know that the sensitivity of that area has been finalized by the experts. Wouldn't be in support of opening up that area unless we knew that information existed. That's just that's just one person talking on the Board of Trustees. But to put any storage units, any permanent buildings in that area, I would have a little bit of concern as well, because that will degrade the area for the natural habitat as well. Any other questions for the applicant or comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, as usual, I have a number of questions. I want to start with clarifying the ADU issue, because I don't understand what's being said by either the staff or the applicant on that. And I've got questions that may go to both of those entities. Throughout the cover memo from Director Strom and in the application, the term accessory dwelling unit was used with capitalized letters as a term of art. It didn't say an additional dwelling unit or an extra house. It said an ADU capitalized. Further, Director Strom's cover memo mentions the requirement of ADUs. It's in our ADU code that you can't use them for short-term vacation rentals. So it certainly appeared to me from all of the application sources that they were actually seeking a ADU capitalized term as that term is used in the code. I mean, another defining characteristic of ADUs is that the town, to encourage their use, this is a policy adopted post-flood, waives utility fees for those. Electric, water, sewer, which the normal fees total $30,500 per dwelling. So is the intent for that additional dwelling unit, whatever you might call it, that those fees will be paid or waived?
From our perspective as the applicant, we hadn't discussed that with staff.
So that's an unknown. How big is that accessory dwelling unit supposed to be?
We hadn't specified, I believe we had specified, and it would be the size that we specified is bigger than code says. So we would be requesting a non-conforming ADU in this situation.
A non-conforming ADU, you mean an ADU that violates the code?
I suppose that would be another way to put it.
Okay, another requirement that the utilities director already mentioned is that an ADU needs to be associated with a principal residence that's the primary residence of the owner. Who lives in the existing house on the farm property?
The son of the owner.
Okay. Is it rented?
Yes.
Okay. How are you physically going to connect the utilities to that house to the new proposed dwelling that's south of the river?
It would involve laying utilities in a trench, or our hope would be to, well, I guess that would be the requirement because it does have to tie into the house.
So you'd go under the river with those?
That would be the only way to do it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll have comments about that requirement later. Let's talk about mid-tier events for a minute, because that's one of the biggest changes that you're proposing here. Mid-tier events didn't exist under the amendable letters of understanding prior to last year's changes, right?
Correct.
And weren't mid-tier events created under those changes specifically to be self-contained within the ranch property, and that the 1,000 number was derived from Planet Bluegrass's statements that was the maximum number it could do, it could handle for a self-contained event on the ranch property and not use the farm?
That's correct. That's the maximum number that we felt we could do self-contained at the ranch property only. My original goal with the creation of the mid-tier event was to be self-contained between our two properties, because we view them as together. But it was the view of the board that and yourself, I believe, that we couldn't create that change of use at the farm without going through the conditional use review process.
So we're really changing the whole concept of what a mid-tier event was under the 2021 agreement.
That's correct. Yes.
And we'd be tripling the size.
That is correct. And that's a size really that we believe is a comfortable size. And it's not saying that every event is going to be 3,000 people, but it's a capacity that allows us to at least shoot for business success and bring in good artists.
Okay, and until the 2021 amendments, what was the maximum crowd size for major events?
I believe it was 3,500 attendees.
So we did have at one time until last year, major events limited to 3,500, but now you want to do mid-tier events up to 3,000.
Correct. We've learned a lot about the capacities and sizes of our event throughout the 20 years since the original agreements were passed, and so we're trying to kind of reframe how these are viewed and separated in a way that makes more sense in the world right now. But I do recognize that it is a substantial change.
Is it the intent to serve food at mid-tier events?
Potentially, probably. I wouldn't say it wouldn't be quite the scope of festival vending that you see at our festivals, but our liquor license requires that we have food of some kind available.
So I believe you said you intend to start mid-tier events, most of them like one-night concerts, around 5 o'clock. So if these start roughly late afternoon, early. So if they start 5 o'clock, late afternoon, whatever, and people would normally arrive a little bit prior, most of the crowd would arrive a little bit prior to the start, right?
Potentially it varies. We've had for the Phil Lesh concert that we did, we had people trying to arrive at 9 and 10 a.m. looking for things to do all day. So I think it kind of depends how far they're coming. Are they local, just kind of coming down, or are they making a day out of it, an experience out of it? And so it varies, I would say.
So my question was leading to, if you start around 5 o'clock and serve food, do you really think that that's going to produce a lot of overflow use of town restaurants and businesses?
Well, so I would say that it depends. I'm not saying that all 3,000 people would be out, visiting the local bars, but I know there's a large subset of people that when they enjoy going to a show, they would want to start the day at around noon and could go to one of our local breweries and have a couple of beers and then walk down the street and then go into the venue. And maybe that means that they get dinner or something at the venue. And we certainly don't prohibit anyone bringing in food. So they're more than welcome to bring in their own food, and we're open to partnering with local businesses to try to make that work better together.
Have you ever looked at actual numbers of how sales tax receipts by other businesses in town are affected by major events, by the festivals at Rocky Grass and Folk Fest, whether
I don't believe I have. I don't believe that sales tax data is public.
well, you report some sales tax data to the town, right?
We report it to the state, and then the state reports it to the town, I believe.
That you also report some sales tax data.
Our vendors, yes.
Correct. And then, of course, the town has sales tax data from other businesses in town.
Okay.
When I did that comparison for the years 2018 and 2019, it looked like that from June to July, from a month in which there were no major events, into a month in which not only is there were there festival events at Rocky Grass in particular, and the July 4th weekend, that sales tax receipts by other businesses in Lyons other than Planet Bluegrass had dropped between 17 and 19%.
That's interesting. I would.
Do you have any reaction to that? Have you ever tried to gauge the effect? Obviously, some businesses near the Planet itself benefit, the market, Stone Cup, that type of thing. But the businesses on the other end of town, have you ever checked with them to ask if they have dead weekends or how their business during major events compares to normal summer weekends?
You know, I not that I'm aware of, but hearing that, that's something that I would like to pursue more, especially as we look at doing this and looking at ways to team up, because that's surprising to me, and I would think that we could remedy that.
Okay. Let's talk about number of campers. How many camping passes were sold in the last couple of years at Riverbend?
Riverbend is about 600.
Okay. But you want to add 1,000 to potentially to the south grazing area.
Potentially, and again, that was just kind of the top end number that we were going to get to by looking at how it actually pans out.
Also, in that regard, in the 2021 agreement that we negotiated and got approved, didn't Planet Bluegrass request additional parking be allowed in the north area of the farm, and the number of vehicles could be parked there to be increased, and that the number of campers be decreased from 950 to 700?
That's correct. That was to more accurately reflect what we've learned actually happens. We camp those areas. It's best to look at, we pretty much utilize the farm to capacity on the north side. And so if we give up parking space to camping, then we need to rehome the cars, which is more challenging than rehoming the campers to this property that already exists for us. So the intent of that change was to more accurately kind of reflect what we found works better actually after having actually used the property.
Okay, and then we increased the maximum number of campers on the ranch site was increased by 250. At the same time, it was decreased by 250 on the north side. Isn't that right? We changed the camping limits on the.
I believe so, and again, that was an adaptation to what we found is actually feasible and realistic, and that speaks to kind of what I was trying to avoid with this designation for the south grazing area. I think the goal should be that the board isn't trying to regulate something that we haven't experienced yet. So I think putting a safe and what I would think is a reasonable top end on it, and then allowing us as the event promoter, who it's in our interest for it to be comfortable and successful camping there, to slowly increase to the number that we feel is correct in that space.
But is it being requested that the maximum number of campers on the north property area be bumped back up to 950 from 700? So that
it is not. Doing that would cost us parking space that is harder to replace elsewhere in town.
I wondered about that because I believe that paragraph 4 of the redlined farm keynotes that's in the packet shows that's what's being proposed. That you're to 950 there.
Let me.
And so perhaps that's a mistake, but.
I'm
that's-
thinking it might be. Let me. Can you give me a page? Oh, okay, I'm here. I show that we took it down from 1,200 to 950.
In the north area, you would have 950 campers.
Up to. So 950 campers or 400 vehicles. And so that's much more heavily used for vehicles. So that's, we're not actually camping 950 people there at this point.
About how many people camp there?
Oh, I'm trying to know if I know that off the top of my head. 450 probably would be my guess off the top of my head right now.
Okay. So you're not just, and I'll go back and look at the documents because it's hard to find them on the computer while we're doing this, but the intent is not to re-increase the allowed camping limit on the north property.
Certainly not, no. And again, I think the way to look at it is that if there was more camping to be had on the north property, we would seek that first. And unfortunately, it's an issue of overall space, and it's not available, which is why we're seeking it in the south grazing area.
This question is for either staff or one of the Planet Bluegrass representatives. I'm not sure who's best positioned to answer it, but Director Strom's cover memo suggests that the potential benefits to the town, which have been emphasized here and are referenced in the comp plan, that's one of the findings we got to make, include property tax benefits. And I was wondering if somebody could explain to me what effect these changes for substantial additional uses, in particular the farm property, are expected to have on property tax.
My understanding would be that with the addition of a bathhouse and potentially a new storage building, that the assessed value of the property would go up, thus the property tax.
Okay, so because right now, the farm property, which was purchased for $1.7 million in 2015, is currently valued on the Boulder County property tax rolls at $763,000, which is about 45% of the purchase price paid 7 years ago. So it's anticipated that that's going to go up with additional buildings.
I would anticipate that the assessed value should go up once the assessor reevaluates it. If it's been 7 years, they're probably still assessing it as an ag value, not a commercial. So we could trigger, if you would like to, the assessor to do an audit of the property.
I'm not sure. You mean a reassessment? I'm not sure.
Well, a reassessment. Okay, a reassessment.
And you anticipated my next question. I believe this has been valued as low as it is because it's an ag property.
I do
But
too.
before you add 1,000 campers, a bathhouse, a proposed additional dwelling unit, we increase the parking. Has anybody asked the assessor's office yet how that affects the ag use valuation?
I don't think we've reached out to the assessor on this particular property yet, but we certainly can. He has a list going in Lyons, or she.
The other thing that Director Strom's cover memo mentions as a possible economic benefit to the town is sales tax could, I guess this goes to Planet Bluegrass, of the changes you seek to make, which of those are anticipated to produce more sales tax for the town?
Mostly it's the increase in the number of events. So, anytime that we run an event, that's going to include a bar and likely food and things like that. So that's kind of the biggest piece. And then of course our intent would be to drive more people into town, which are then patronizing businesses and such.
Well, I mean, the actual admission price for the tickets and the parking, it's not subject to sales tax, right?
Correct.
So if the sales tax is going to come from food sales, which are taxable at the ranch, it seems like to me you've got some inconsistency there in what you're suggesting. You're going to sell food at the ranch, it's going to increase sales tax, but at the same time, additional patronizing of restaurants in town is going to increase sales tax to the town. And that's really the question. Do you really think that you're going to have a big sales tax effect on the town if you're selling food for people who are coming to the venues for late afternoon concerts?
I don't think those two necessarily need to be mutually exclusive. I could certainly see people buying an appetizer in town and then coming to buy dinner from us. And again, I think the bigger sales tax driver on our end is the bar, because that is going to far exceed any kind of food or anything like that. So that's kind of where I would look more to that. But I could certainly see it. Again, it's a little hard to know, but I would certainly see that's possible from both aspects. If it's, half the people are patronizing businesses in Lyons and half of them are utilizing our interior food offerings. Either way, the net effect is benefit to the town from sales tax revenue.
Okay. Would it be anticipated that any food sales, particularly at these the mid-tier events, would be handled the same way that the festivals are, that it would be Planet Bluegrass itself that would collect those sales taxes and report them rather than food truck by food truck?
That would be the intent. Other than if a vendor had a business license within the town of Lyons and a state license and chose to remit, but none in my experience have wanted that option when we've offered them what we've traditionally done in the past.
And the other tax that was studied and agreed substantially, and that was substantially in the 2021 compromise agreement, was lodging tax. We went in that in great detail. And if you increase camping, you're going to increase lodging tax, correct?
Yep, and that would be a positive from this. And why we want to keep camping on the table as a possibility at these mid-tier events too, if the right event fell into our lap for that.
Were you present for the Board of Trustees meeting where the possibility of increasing the town's lodging tax was discussed? Did you hear that discussion?
I believe I was.
Okay. The concept was thrown out there at that meeting of potentially, and you're aware that there's a big new hotel, the subject of whenever that was, last week's meeting, I guess. And there's been discussion of increasing our $2 lodging tax to $5, $7, $10. That was no decision. Are you aware of that discussion?
I am.
Okay. And there was brief discussion at that meeting of the possibility of severing Planet Blue camping operations from the lodging tax, and instead replacing it with some type of a municipal impact fee that would not be geared to the number of campers and stuff. Is Planet Bluegrass open to that suggestion? Willing to negotiate about that?
I'm not going to state if we're open to anything. I'm certainly open to listening to discussions and things like that, but I would want to make sure that this is something that was discussed within our team and our group before I said anything beyond that.
Sure, but I mean, of course, doesn't Planet Bluegrass face a risk if the town bumps its lodging tax from $2 a night to $10 a night with the view to the hotel of your camping charges going from $2 to $10?
Absolutely.
So, and that was really my suggestion at that meeting and my inquiry tonight, rather than to have that happen, for you to be dragged along to a much higher lodging tax rate along with the hotel, would Planet Bluegrass consider some other way to address its potential impact on town services and traffic and so forth?
We're certainly open to looking at and hearing you out on thoughts on that.
I believe those are all. Water rights dedication. First question is that for staff to the town attorney. Aren't water rights dedications normally addressed in annexation agreements before they're completed?
Normally, yes, but in this case, the town and the Planet Bluegrass agreed to a different arrangement.
Right, they agreed to defer it, and now the request, Mr. Tucker, is to defer that again, correct?
That is correct, based on the fact that we're not intending to increase our use.
Okay, but the Utilities and Engineering Board has requested as a condition, as I read it, I guess for building permit approval, rather than approval here tonight, a complete engineering report that is it your understanding that that would include a third-party engineer's review of your projected water use and impact on the sewer system and electric use, that type of thing?
That's my understanding. And at that point, we would have building plans and things like that that outline the exact number of toilets and sinks and things like that would provide a definitive answer to the use question.
And so in that regard, let me see if I heard you right. You'd be adding a new bathhouse, which also, I guess, would include restrooms on the farm property.
Correct.
You intend at some point, maybe not immediately, to expand and renovate the existing bathhouse restroom facility on the ranch property, correct?
Correct, but those are on different taps.
Yeah, but I'm thinking overall.
Oh, yeah.
Town's utility system. And then I think I heard you say that in doing renovations and expansion of the green room facility, cabin facility that exists right now, you anticipate an expanded new building that would also have restrooms, facilities, expanded restroom facilities for that building. Is that correct?
Yes, those would be not like big public restroom style things, but single toilets. And I would also stress that we wouldn't be increasing the number of people using them or anything like that. And I should also clarify that our expansion of the bathhouse doesn't necessarily mean expansion of the number of toilets. It could just mean an expansion of the structure to shift things around or include a shop in it or something like that.
Okay. Oh, and the new bathhouse proposed on the farm property, would it also have water facilities for the campers there? If you have 500,000, whatever campers you end up having on the South Grazing facility, is that where they would get their water for their campsites?
Yes, like their potable water for cooking or something like that. Yes,
just like exists now. That's what they do now for on the ranch.
Yes.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Any further questions from any of the other trustees? Trustee Rogan?
Yeah, one brief, easy question after that. So I'm glad to hear that you've engaged with experts to talk about the ecological perspective. And I wonder if you're including the effect of having a fence on the property in that study.
I think that would be the intent. We aren't building a privacy fence.
Right.
The fence would match the fences that already run across that area. Just literally the property next above us has the exact fence already in place. Okay. But they're completely flow through for small animals and things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Further questions?
Trustee Waugh did have his hand raised earlier, I noticed.
Trustee Waugh, would you like to?
I was just going to respond to Mayor Pro Tem's question about property value. I know the adding of the spots for the tiny houses and camping and those types of things, if they're full hookups, add significantly to the appraisal of the property. $50,000 per slip is my experience. So we're talking $600,000 for 12 tiny house hookup spots.
I have a couple of questions, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe the misunderstanding of accessory dwelling unit and what's been referred to as an additional building tonight may have been perhaps the fact that an accessory dwelling unit doesn't have to incur the additional water, sewer, and electric fees. But you're talking about building a unit in the South Grazing area. And this is what I'd like to know. Regardless of whether the house that exists on the property now is within 400 feet of a sewer line, basically the code says the property line, not the house. It says the property line. So what I'm asking is, what is the intent, since the house is on a septic, what is the intent of what's going to happen with the sewage on the proposed housing unit in the southern grazing area?
Absolutely. So in our discussion with staff, we landed that the best course of action would be to not require anything of the house at the moment, but in the event that we built the bathhouse or the ADU, that would trigger the need to connect everything to the town sewer system. So if we were going to build the ADU, it wouldn't just start using the house's septic system. At that point, we would connect everything to the sewer.
Because I certainly couldn't see using a septic in the southern grazing area, that's for sure.
That's not our intent either, and I believe not allowed in the Lyons code.
Okay. That's all I have.
Mayor Angelo?
Yes.
My name's Justin Conrad. I'm attorney working with Planet Bluegrass.
And your address for the record, sir?
Sure, I'm with Hutchinson, Black & Cook in Boulder. My address is 4792 Kellogg Circle in Boulder.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to Mayor Pro Tem Browning's question about the zone or the code requirements on the ADU. And I apologize, I was looking for the code sites and couldn't get to it in time before he moved on to his next point. But I just wanted to throw out there that I think some of the confusion may be the way it originated is that CE1 commercial entertainment districts permit on-site residents and residences and permit additional buildings and uses that are accessory to those principal purposes, using the term accessory. So I think that's what the intent was to comply with the code there, and that may have turned into using the term ADU, and I'm not clear on the details, but I think the code is pretty clear that a CE1 commercial entertainment district does permit residences and accessory buildings, and just isn't specific about the details of those. So I just wanted to throw that into the conversation.
Thank you. Rosie? Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, in response to that, so same question that I asked Mr. Tucker, if this is not intended to be a capitalized accessory dwelling unit as covered in that section of the code, but rather essentially an additional dwelling unit that I would agree with you can be done in the CE1 district, wouldn't that mean that Planet Bluegrass would need to pay the connection charges for electric, water, and wastewater that are waived for a true ADU?
I think that may be possible. I think we would need, because this issue is just coming up to us right now, we would need to circle up and discuss, but that certainly would be part of the discussion.
And if I could add to that, because I'm the one that came up with the ADU term in talking with Philip, I can honestly tell you, I was not aware of the $30,000 waiver fee. I honestly was not. So for those of you who know me, I think you can believe me when I say that. I was not aware of that. So that was not the intent. It was a very casual, well, this is like an accessory dwelling unit. And it was just a discussion between Philip and I, and that's where it came from. It didn't even come from Zach or Craig. It was me. So we get your point, and we would check into that. But yeah, we saw it as a building that was going to be staff housing. And the plan shows that rectangle on the plan, and it shows both storage use and the staff housing use. And it doesn't have a specific square footage assigned because we don't have that building designed yet. So, so we would clearly have to meet whatever requirements staff indicated we needed to follow when we got ready to design that building. So I just wanted to clarify, we weren't trying to get away with, by calling it something else, we could save 30,000 in fees.
I was
Honest. Okay.
about that. I didn't understand. I thought that might be the purpose behind it. And while we're on the subject, for additional clarification, Ms. Dennett and Attorney Conrad, could I ask you, both, either of you, to comment on in paragraph 18 of the annexation agreement. For some reason, there's, as Ms. Dennett just said, they would have to comply with, like anybody else, with the Lyons Municipal Code on connecting new utilities. There's this phrase in there that says, except that annexor, which is the Planet Bluegrass Farm, shall not be required to pay the wastewater connection fee as set forth in section 13.4 ADC of the LMC, as set forth in the easement agreement. Can anybody explain what that wastewater connection fee waiver provision was doing in the annexation agreement, and whether you intend to continue, and whether Planet Bluegrass would request that the wastewater connection fee be waived? I don't know why it's there, and I'm unclear what fees they would be paying.
Do you recall, Zach?
I do not. Maybe it was something to, I'm honestly not sure.
Maybe the staff recalls, because that was 2017.
Yeah.
So I looked into it briefly just to see, but that's where it mentions this previous easement agreement that was done in 2017. I thought that was sent on as part of the preparations or the material. That gets into a whole nother document, right? The easement agreement. So I'm not sure where that's at.
Yeah, I thought it was uploaded, but I'm looking for it. I'm not seeing it, but it was definitely intent to upload that document.
And I did just get some clarification on that. And Craig believes that it's because we were unable, since we were on septic at the time, we were unable to connect to a sewer line. So the fee wasn't charged to us.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant? If not, council, we proceed to the public hearing. Okay, I'll open the public hearing for comments from the public. Please, let's see. As Counselor said, all written correspondence has been distributed to the Board of Trustees and included as part of the written record. You don't need to speak if you submitted an email, but you may if you want to. So we'll open it up for public comment. Please state your name and physical address of residence for the public record. PO boxes are not appropriate. Please direct your input to the Board of Trustees, not the applicant or staff. The staff, applicant, or BOT will not respond to your input at this time, but may choose to during step 6, which is next. Madam Clerk, could you please help me in regard to anybody that wishes to address the Board of Trustees on this issue?
Yes, sir. Crystal DeCoster has her hand raised.
Crystal DeCoster, you're recognized.
Crystal DeCoster, 113 East 5th Avenue, Lyons, Colorado. Thank you, BOT, Mayor Angelo, Town of Lyons staff for your dedicated efforts that help make Lyons consciously evolving and a great place to live. Planet Bluegrass, Apple Valley Road, Steamboat Mountain, St. Vrain Creek, Laverne Johnson. What do these things all have in common? They have been here a while, they have stories to tell, and they're true icons of Lyons. The meaning of icon is a person or thing widely admired, especially for having great influence or significance in a particular sphere. The meaning of icon in this instance, for a key event at one of these icons in our sphere, 2022 has a special hot rise significance. It's Planet Bluegrass's 50th anniversary celebration of the internationally recognized Rocky Grass Festival. Chatting recently with a member of Team Planet, I'm sensing that with this landmark event comes a positive shift. They're revisiting a vision with a respectful nod and intention nudging of their audience towards more actively supporting the businesses and arts offerings of Lyons. As a business owner of 7 years who's familiar with shifting and pivoting, especially after things beyond our control, such as epic floods and COVID conundrums, I believe that the cha-cha-cha of survival that the planet has mustered is deserving of a standing ovation. The Herculean effort it took to hold a fine festival the summer after the river churned sod into mud was a demonstration of extraordinary coordination, fortitude, investment, and hope. No beating around the bush, the strategic high regard for our mothership that has made the planet an exemplar of festival sustainability, waste diversion efforts renowned well beyond our yonder mountains and steep canyons is, well, truly eye-opening and edifying for everybody. The rock-solid reputation that this enterprise has incubated in order to lure beloved acts and fans from all over the globe here to Little Lyons, Colorado, has been built upon thought-through, rock-solid, albeit sometimes slippery, footing. To suspect that this largely homegrown and Lion-centric festivarian team cannot manage to pull off a safe, sane, and sensibly managed auxiliary campgrounds while respecting their peaceful Apple Valley neighbors and our beloved St. Vrain is a disconnect between that which the planet has planned, modeled, and proven without a punch since 1988. I personally choose to believe that Planet Bluegrass will be respectful of all their fellow icons, Apple Valley Road, Steamboat Mountain, St. Vrain Creek, and of course, Laverne Johnson, this summer as they have done every other summer. I believe they'll leave things better than how they found it. And I believe they'll continue to be widely admired for having great influence and significance here in our sphere of Lyons. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Sir, next up is Betsy Burton.
Betsy Burton, you're recognized for the record.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Betsy Burton, 1308 Apple Valley Road, Lyons, Colorado. Crystal, I can't follow that. I don't have the vocabulary or the adjectives, but I do have a few things to say, and I think that was very, very well said. Look like a weird angel with this light behind me. We're out of town, so I'm going to try to move this a little bit. Anyway, so I'm in an awkward situation a little bit here. Some of you may know, some of you may not. But the reason they need camping on the Apple Valley side of the farm property is because we're not allowing camping at Riverbend anymore. The reason we're not allowing camping at Riverbend anymore, and we did for 7 years, and I will say, Planet Bluegrass was extremely respectful. Everything they did was very professional. Like Crystal said, they left it, I don't know, better than when they found it, but they always left it, you know, in very, very good shape. And that was always very much appreciated. We are not saying no to camping for them for that reason at all. We're saying no because they couldn't help it that those little tarps and tents make yellow rectangles in the grass. And we have a wedding 5 days later. And after 7 years of that, we actually ended up giving some money back to some wedding couples sometimes because they were disappointed. It just was really hard to maintain the grass. But as far as Planet Bluegrass doing a great job, they always did. On the other side of that, we live on Apple Valley, and I respect and I understand everything that all the Apple Valley neighbors are saying. But what I do want to say is that because of the fence they're going to build, and I know the look of the fence is a very nice fence. Animals can get through, deer can jump over, water can flow through. That the people that will be camping there will not be coming on Apple Valley Road. They have to come on the bridges and the temporary bridge and the permanent bridge that they're proposing to build there. And there won't be cars on Apple Valley. And that's huge for as a resident of Apple Valley. And we appreciate that. We also appreciate Zach listening and pulling the yurt village idea and the bathhouse idea. That's very much appreciated by Apple Valley residents. But as far as camping on Apple Valley side, I just think they'll be very respectful of it. And as far as back to Riverbend a little bit, this is a money losing weekend for us as a Riverbend business. We're not doing weddings because we're not renting out to Planet Bluegrass anymore for camping and parking. We're not doing weddings because we don't want to do weddings when the town is so crowded. So we're basically just having a quiet weekend over at Riverbend in order to kind of keep everybody happy. And that's kind of what we always try to do. So that's my main objective here is, you know, as long as the camping is done as they say it will be done and nothing else, and the yurts and everything are going to be moved over to the other property, I feel good about it as long as the EPA study, everything is, you know, being done right now with the wetlands, the floodplain, the mouse, and everyone else. So I am my hat goes off to Planet Bluegrass. What an amazing job they've done for so many years here, and I think they will continue to always be professional and good neighbors. Although this is a bit of a change for us as Apple Valley residents, but I'm fine with the camping. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Next up is Candace Donovan.
Candace Donovan, you are recognized.
Hey guys, my name is Candace Donovan. I live at 116 Eagle Canyon Circle. I've been listening all night long. It's been a great presentation by the Planet, and I really appreciate a lot of the questions that Trustee Brown asked earlier. My concern is the increase in size of these mid-tier events. And I'll ask the people on the board, many of you were here when you first asked for the change in zoning to what was the farm across the street. We were told in Eagle Canyon, we're directly across from this property. It's a very, very significant impact to our ability to get in and out of our neighborhood. Every time we try to leave, it's big. The lights in the parking area are very bright. They stay on. They're quite lengthy. The noise associated to people coming out, you know, a lot of times people are drinking, they're drunk. It's very loud. There's a lot of music being played as people are leaving. When the zoning was first approved, the zoning change was first approved, we were told that that property would be used only for small events like weddings. And I think, I don't remember the exact number of days, but I want to say it was something like 10. So now you're saying these mid-tier events are essentially 3,000 people, which, you know, 3,000, 3,500, it's a large event. And now, rather than having, you know, a very isolated experience at the farm for weddings and so forth, we're actually seeing what I think a lot of us were really afraid of, which was that this was all of a sudden going to be scope creep, right? And so now we're being asked to essentially, you know, live immediately across the street in what has been not only a residential area, but pretty much a rural area to accommodate essentially a full-size festival worth of parking and people. And that's not what we agreed to when we agreed with you guys back in 2017 that this was how it's going to be. And now all of a sudden it's completely changed. And it's not fair to the neighborhood. So, you know, the camping, I understand the need to look at that from an environmental perspective. That's really less of an impact for us because it's on the back side of the property, not next to Eagle Canyon. but we are very significantly impacted when you start talking about having, 20 plus events of 3,000 people who are going to be parking. It really changes this from a residential area to a commercial district, and it's not okay. It's not what we agreed to. So when you go to your vote, I'll ask you, considering no one's really clear on what the financial benefit of these increases are, except for Planet Bluegrass. It's a shock to hear that tickets aren't taxable or the parking isn't taxable. So with what no one can really define as being the benefit, you're asking a lot of people who own property here, who live here, to make a lot of accommodations for a business without really being able to say this is what the real value of that is. And with that, I'll just ask you to keep that in your consideration when you vote.
Thank you. Madam Clerk. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Next up, we have Parker Johnson.
Parker Johnson, you're recognized, sir.
Hi, Parker Johnson, 382 Apple Valley Road. Wow, hearing Candace just speak was an eye opener. In certain regards, I'm on Apple Valley, the other side. I first want to say that I'm almost perfectly aligned with what Betsy offered, who also lives on Apple Valley. I think we should do everything we can to ensure that kind of the mothership of our town and what put us on the map it continues to thrive. And I think we need to be mindful. I am unclear about what the understanding or what the agreements were when the annexation agreement had. Candace just referenced it, and a dozen of the letters that came in from neighbors referenced that in 2017, it was our understanding, maybe sometimes you just hear what you want to hear, but it was our understanding that, agreements were made about disturbing the land. And I'm in agreement and feel like that many of the neighbors want to accommodate the planet and say, yep, camping feels like a good, that's okay. And it's in the spirit of kind of living where we live and choosing to be a part of our town. So I'm down, pardon the vernacular. I'm all for doing our best to accommodate their request to camp and to use the south grazing area, which is, directly impacting Apple Valley Road. I want to also appreciate and offer what Betsy said about, pulling the request for the Yurt Village and the bathhouse on the south side of the road. Something that came up for me today, two things. One, about the Blackwater and gray water on anything that happens on the south side. Where do you go with that? I don't think you can put septic in, and I can tell you that trenching under the river is a Herculean task and had to be done for Bill Cronin, who lives across from me, after the flood, and we had to dig the river up to reconnect his water line, which comes up through the middle of Apple Valley. It was supposed to be a 5-week job, and it was 5 months. And I know that the budget he had planned for it was multiples of what it was originally bid at. And so I just caution, let's be really mindful about how far we get out ahead of ourselves, approving things that we hadn't fully thought through. And so I trust that the process ensure that we, check all the boxes and make sure that that's good. But, I don't have a strong, no, this is bad, we shouldn't do this. And I just want to put that in many of the neighbors I've talked to, some are, that nothing will appease them, but totally keeping it untouched. But I am, for my own curiosity, curious, what was the agreement in 2017 about non-disturbance or what about what would happen? And there is, some consideration for this accommodation, even though I think it's in all of our best interest to make sure the planet stays healthy. So I don't know that I have anything definitive beyond that. I have one question as it relates to, on the diagram, it shows a fence, the border fence, same fence I have in my yard, by the way, which is a great fence. But is it going to go across the river? Are we actually going to cross the river with the fence so that there is a grazing area that would in fact do the whole 360 on the property? And then what does that do in terms of boaters, tubers, kayakers, swimmers, anything to have a fence going across the river? So I'd love at some point if somebody would address that. And previously at the PCDC, something came up about the porta potties and just the stench of porta potties if they are left on the property between festivals, and just some agreement that we would have that they would have to be cleaned, in a timely fashion, and that there would be some, ability for us to do that. Or just to have a say in, hey, let's make sure that is done. But I can't imagine they wouldn't want to do that for all of us. I also want to offer that raising the midweek deals to 10 p.m. in the summer is no problem. And I wanted to just say, again, these are places where we can accommodate their business model and make it more enjoyable. I thought that the Phil Lesh event was an amazing event, and would love to see more things like that happen. So that's all I have to offer, I think. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions may be answered after the public hearing by the applicant or the Board of Trustees or staff. Madam Clerk.
No, sir, I don't see anyone else with the hand raised or wishing to speak.
That is the case. I'll close the public. Pardon me.
I don't know how to fucking do it.
Pardon me.
Hey, are you there?
Hello?
It's Arthur Leland. I don't know how to put my hand up. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll open the public hearing and recognize Arthur Leland.
Hey. Sorry. Arthur Leland, 521 Fifth Avenue in the heart of downtown Lyons. I just want to grab my phone with my notes, but I really just want to speak from my heart. I want to thank everybody for the thankless job of doing town politics and everything that you guys do. I know it's so much data that you guys deal with. And I just want to acknowledge all of you for your service, because it's a big deal. So thank you for that. I just want to start out and just say really quick that I came here 20 years ago to Planet Bluegrass on a tip from my cousin and my brother, who happened to be in the business, and they said there's this folks festival happening. And so I ended up coming here on a whim with Carol Lee in 2002, and it's changed my life. I've been coming here ever since that first time coming to the Song School, which is for those of you who don't know, it's an educational songwriters camp that happens before Folks Fest. And then Rocky Grass has a Rocky Grass Academy, which is a bluegrass educational camp. This Planet Bluegrass is the top of the industry. As an artist myself and a professional musician, coming here with no knowledge before 2002 of Planet Bluegrass, and then being pretty much blown away, and also knowing that these people are my family and that I need to move here from, I was living in Chicago. Carol Lee and I were in Chicago at that point. And it was life-changing. And I want to say, from the perspective of people who come to Lyons for what Lyons has to offer. And to me, oh man, my battery's going to go dead on my computer. Hang on. Shit. Sorry about this. Anyway, flow with me for a moment. All right, good. So from that perspective of festivarians and artists, and the people who come as, musicians, but also fans. In other words, people who are coming to the Academy and to the Folks Fest Song School. It's a very, very, very special place. It's almost like a pilgrimage. And getting to know Planet Bluegrass I've been teaching at the song school since 2003, and getting to know everybody there, the whole team, the whole family. It's really a large family thing. I fell in love with Lyons, but I found out from my perspective as a professional in the industry that Planet Bluegrass and what they were providing in terms of musical festival experiences was the top of the pyramid for live events, on the level of production, on the level of artistry, on the level of low carbon footprint, on the level of really, I would say, understanding that from my perspective that Lyons is a place where people have been gathering for millennia in celebration, where celebration community. The white people that came here is that we're not the first people to do this. This is an energy center for that. And that's why we do weddings here. That's why we do the music that we have here. And it's the top of the game. And it's really the sacred land that we live on. And so I just want to leave with this point of view that it's in the best interest, I feel, of everybody to have Planet Bluegrass to do what they do great and to move into the next generation and next cycle of this, because Planet Bluegrass has a whole new team of young people, and Planet Bluegrass is going to be here. Most of us here are not going to be around, and Planet Bluegrass will still be here. And I think it's really, really a very sacred place that has been upkept in the best way that it can be. And so my hat's off to that whole team and the town of Lyons. And really, if it wasn't for Planet Bluegrass and all the support that we've gotten with Rave to the Grave, we wouldn't have been able to pull off what we did at the park this year, which thank you everybody in town for that, because that was a whole nother miracle of life in Lyons to pull that off from scratch, because we did Rave to the Grave under the guise of Planet Bluegrass providing everything that we needed. And so for the first year this year, to do it, post-pandemic or kind of in the middle of a little bit of the late side of it, to have it go as well as it did is still also a big nod to Planet Bluegrass. The support from them has been amazing. So again, I just want to put more of a global stamp on how important I think the responsibility of Planet Bluegrass is as a cultural mecca, as Lyons as a cultural mecca, and what it means to a larger population and then our population here. And so I just want to thank everybody for hearing my perspective. I love you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll ask you again, Madam Clerk, if there's anybody else that you can see that wishes to address the Board of Trustees. You muted.
I don't see anyone, sir.
Thank you. I will close the public hearing, and I'll give the applicant an opportunity to respond and make any final comments.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Angelo. Rosie Dennett again, had to think what my last name was. Must be getting tired. I just wanted to reiterate and make it a little more clear what my previous comments were regarding the wildlife assessment and the environmental issues, so that this can be a commitment of record, if you will. But, we have engaged a wildlife biologist and a wetland ecologist, and we can commit to obtaining an approval letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife regarding the habitat for the mouse, for example. And then we can also have the wetland ecologist define the wetland area. And our commitment was to do that before the July Rocky Grass. So we would submit that to staff, and they would verify that we could meet that commitment before we actually allowed camping there. So that would be our commitment at this point, which is a little bit risky for us because we need to be able to sell tickets for camping soon. So But this is something we feel confident about based on our preliminary discussions with these professionals. So we are certainly willing to commit to that if that helps. And then I think Zach's going to respond to a couple other comments that were made.
Yeah, I appreciate all the comments and the overall support that we've seen forever as an organization. So in reference to the lights in the parking area, it's always our intent to minimize that as much as possible. They are a safety aspect of parking and making sure people can get out safely, but we do make sure that we've shut them off every night by 11 or 12, or as soon as activity dies down enough in the parking areas that we think it's safe to do so. And then also to clarify Parker's comment, we are not intending to fence across the river. That was how the perimeter fence was drawn as a yellow line kind of around the perimeter, but we certainly have no intention of fencing across the river or anything like that. And then finally, just further clarifying that we have no intention of leaving porta potties uncleaned. It's a core of everything we do. We don't want to be smelling them or be near them either. So we can make a commitment of record to not leave porta potties uncleaned at any time.
Okay. In regard to final comments, there are none coming from any of the board members. Council will proceed to the Board of Trustees discussion and the need to make a motion.
If the board has any final,
If the board has any final discussion items, they can do it now as well.
any final questions for the applicant? Sorry, my screen is partially frozen.
Yeah, that happened. That's happening to me tonight too.
Yeah, it's weird. It's never happened to me before. But yeah, if the board has any final questions, now would be the time to do that for the applicant, because no new evidence will be allowed to be into the record after we enter into board discussions, only clarifying questions at the choice of the board. And so if there's any final questions for the applicant, now's your chance.
Are there any final questions for the applicant? In regard to the reason that, I'm going to try to phrase this as a question. In regard to the reason that you had to come up with camping because of the riverbend concern in regard to it discoloring their grass, impacting their site. What mitigating means would you use to revive the south grazing area from the camping as well?
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start this with, we also perform the flip from festivals to weddings. And we tend to do it on a 1 week turnaround, and it is tight. We have just the general use on grass is impactful. And we found that luckily our grass, our entire property is extremely resilient. And so we tend to ahead of time warn any weddings that are the week after festivals that you're likely to see impacts slightly yellowed areas where tarps are because the grass isn't getting the sunlight all day and stuff like that. But it's not enough that with about a week and a half of sunlight and no traffic on it, it usually bounces right back. So I would note that the concerns of Riverbend are simply about managed turf being prepared for a bride and a groom who are paying a lot of money to have a bunch of guests there versus long-term impacts from that use. So what we've seen is that simply just the temporary nature of our use is really what allows it to come back quickly. And so we're not doing a bunch of events back to back. We're spacing out, and the fact that at most it could be 12 days a year leaves plenty of time for it to naturally come back. And then on top of that, we add watering whenever we can, and we'll make sure that certain areas that might be having trouble aren't being tracked upon by like service vehicles or anything like that. So it's a quick, in the scheme of the environment, I think it's a quick response and it comes back quickly. It's just simply not quick enough for a managed turf setting that a wedding is paying for. So I don't really have many concerns there, because our grass is always so quick to come back, even just naturally from us not tracking on it as soon as we're done with the events. Does that answer your question?
Not completely.
Okay.
Because what I want answered is, how are you going to mitigate completely the impact to what I assume is a much more environmentally sensitive area than a managed grass area? That's my question.
If I could just add something to that. First of all, what we're talking about, Mary Angelo, is having the wetland, the sensitive area, the wetland is the area that we're going to have completely fenced off. So we're not talking about camping in those areas. So those areas, and that's a little different than the existing camping that occurs over on the ranch property, where those are just, grassy areas where folks can camp. So we're not proposing to camp in those sensitive areas. And because of the Planet Bluegrass's long history here of doing this and running these facilities, is they're pretty good at keeping control of their folks in these camping areas. So they feel quite confident that they can keep them out of that sensitive area. So I don't know if that helps.
Okay. It does. Along with your previous statements of hiring people that can assure you that you're not impacting extremely sensitive ecological areas that you admitted could perhaps be a risk. That's fine. All right. So we'll move on to a Board of Trustees discussion. And Counselor, do we need a motion?
If there's no further questions from the board or final statements from the applicant, we'll need a motion in a second, of course, to begin the discussion.
Okay. Do we have any?
Mayor Angelo, I'd like to it's almost 10 o'clock. I'd like to request a 5-minute break if you don't mind.
I guess we could do that before we get into our discussion.
Thank you.
Fine. 5 minutes. Okay. We'll wait for trustee Lowell to get back, and I'd just like to get a consensus of the Board of Trustees, just how long they'd like to continue this discussion tonight. It's already almost 10 o'clock. We're not done with our first item of business. So I'd just like everybody to think about how long we want this to go on this evening, and whether we delay the rest of these considerations to a date certain. But we'll finish the first item on the agenda first.
And so for the board's recollection, this is for the conditional use of the farm property. So if there's anything regarding the other properties, we should reserve that for the appropriate time.
So we would need a motion on resolution 2022-19.
That's correct, Mayor Angelo. Motion and a second to begin discussion.
Okay. Trustee Rogan,
I move to adopt resolution 2022-19.
do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Trustees? Trustee Lowell? You're muted. Okay, go.
Procedural, is it appropriate at this time to offer amendments to the annexation agreement?
No, the annexation agreement is a separate item. So for this point, it's the keynotes and the site plan
Oh, I'm sorry.
for the farm property.
My mistake. I meant the keynotes.
Yep. Yeah, this is the
Okay.
appropriate time for the keynotes.
Okay, therefore, I'd like to offer a amendment. I'd like to make a motion that in the 2017 farm keynotes to the conceptual plan for Planet Bluegrass Farm annexation, under numerical keynote 5, titled South Grazing Area, Wetlands, parenthetically 2.8 acres, close parens, leave the entire keynote unchanged from the original. Further, delete the proposed additional keynotes 14, 16, and 17.
Can you reiterate what those other three items were?
Or
Trustee
do you
Lowell?
want to give us the page number anyway?
It doesn't have a page number on it. It's only references it by the keynotes. It's in the modified keynotes to conceptual plan for Planet Bluegrass Farm annexation. It's got blue markups, red markups, green markups.
Yeah, and if it helps, I can read out what 14, 16, 17 are for the board too.
Would you please, Counselor?
Yeah, so 14 regards a temporary bridge, the bridge spanning the North St. Vrain Creek to allow pedestrian or livestock access between the properties. Placement is temporary and as approved in the annual floodplain development permit. So that's number 14. Number 16 is future temporary or permanent storage structure. Storage structures in the south grazing area may be temporary or a permanent structure, not to exceed 2,000 square feet or 35 feet in maximum height. Number 17 is future accessory dwelling unit. Accessory dwelling unit built above the storage structure in keynote 16 or as a separate structure. Maximum height is 35 feet. Maximum floor area is 2,000 feet. Approval of building permit will be subject to grading and utility review approved by Utilities and Engineering Commission. That should be board, but it reads commission currently.
So we have an amendment proposed by Trustee Lowell. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion, Trustee Lowell?
Yes. You forgive me, I'm going to be reading through some notes here. First of all, my reason for this motion of this amendment is I take objection to the statement that this conditional use minimizes environmental impacts, mitigates impacts to wildlife and wildlife habitat. I'd like to remind my fellow trustees that in 2014, I believe, the town officially adopted the Sustainable River Corridor Action Plan, which under Goal 4 states encourage ecologically responsible restoration and development within the riparian zone. To my mind, the addition of 200 campsites, a permanent storage building with an ADU, basically a living dwelling, in a FEMA mapped floodway, which is what the majority of this south grazing area is hardly what I'd call ecologically responsible. Further, I'd like to point out that the recently released comprehensive plan framework, which we received, dated 1/31/22, has as one of its potential goals, number NE3, that states that the town should adapt the natural and built environment to respect the natural functions and processes of the St. Vrain River. How does this development in the floodway respect those functions and processes? A floodway conveys floodwaters from upstream to downstream, and obstructions like buildings, fences, shipping containers increase the height downstream and increase water velocity to the detriment of riparian properties downstream. This development flies in the face of the functions and processes of the river. I'd like to remind everybody that the work that we've done remediating the 2013 flood, we spent a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to create areas such as this, which we're now proposing that it should be developed. I hope you all had a chance to read the Ecology Board's comments. People far smarter than me have written their opinions on this issue in the document that you found in your packet tonight. As the Ecology Board states, this development of the riparian zone and the wetlands must be viewed from the perspective of the river and the ecosystem's health. We shouldn't be altering the river's natural functions by development in this riparian zone. The original annexation agreement had it right. The agreed upon limits of use in this south grazing area were correct and ecologically sound. But even now we see that those limits aren't being honored. I somehow find it amazing that the town staff has never noticed the 4 shipping containers, the stacks of barrels, and the fence posts at the western end of the property. In other ways, the property has been changed. Roads have been cut through. A lot of vegetation has been taken down. I would also urge my fellow trustees to reread the short comments in your package by Dave Hurt, who is a Lyons resident and a Boulder County wildlife biologist, who says that the southern grazing area has been compromised by the removal of dead wood and brush and the construction of paths and roads. It wasn't meant to be a manicured area. It was meant to be a wild riparian zone. Again, as I say, the original Keynotes had it right. In fact, had I had a say when Keynote 5 was written, I would have further suggested a subdivision of the southern grazing area and that it would have restrictive covenants or a conservation easement on it to prevent an attempt at a variance such as the one we're seeing tonight. You know, there's been a lot of talks about fencing off the wetlands and protecting the wetlands. I know they're a small part of the 2.8 acres. I just want to remind people that you can't fence off a wetland. A wetland is an integral part of any ecological system. There are species that depend on the wetlands. They travel back and forth to them. Some of these wetlands are ephemeral, which means they're only used at certain times of the year by certain species. Fencing them off is basically going to kill them. So again, leave Keynote as it was written, Keynote 5 as it was written. I suggested deleting Keynotes 14 and 16 and 17 because if we leave 5 as written, then those 3 other added keynotes would have no substantial effect. Promises were made at the time of the annexation, and insofar as the southern grazing area is concerned, I think they should be kept. That was the reason for my amendment.
Thank you, sir. Counselor?
Sorry, I was muted. Just a quick question, Trustee Lowell, if you may. Does your amendment also relate to condition 7 of the approval criteria regarding mitigating impacts on wildlife and wildlife habitat? Is that correct?
That was my point. That was I was taking objection to. Yes.
Thank you.
Any further comments? If none, we'll vote on Trustee Lowell's amendment.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
No.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee,
Did you say Trustee Miller? Or
yes,
Trustee Kerr?
Trustee Miller,
Sorry, you cut out. No.
Trustee Carabas,
No.
and Trustee Waugh.
No.
The amendment fails. Further items of discussion by the board? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I'm a little uncertain of the timing of when to make comments about what. I don't want to split up comments for all 7, however many things we have to vote on. So, I wasn't real clear about what I needed to do on Trustee Lowell's amendment either, but just for time's purposes, at least for tonight, and I agree with the mayor, we may need to hold some of this stuff till a later date. I think it's best to go ahead and get my comments now, and then I can refer to them later and not repeat them. First of all, I think we all need to acknowledge the benefits that Planet Bluegrass has brought to this community. In many ways, it put Lyons on the map. It does good things for our local artists, and really is part of the soul of this community at this point. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I think we have, including in the 2021 changes we did, have gone a long way to address things that aided Bluegrass in what it does and made it easier for them to do their events. There are some competing considerations here, though. The most important of which, to me, was touched on by a citizen from Eagle Canyon, who pointed out that there were clearly representations made to the public in 2017 when a vote was taken. And the general gist of those representations were this property would be used for limited purposes and kept largely in development, including specifically the south grazing area. Additionally, if you look at the purposes stated in the keynotes, the farm property was to be used for 2 purposes. It was to be used to support major events as basically an adjunct property, and those are the festivals, limited as to the number of days. And there was to be a small number of limited minor events, not to exceed 250 people, basically small weddings on the farm, and that was it. And when you add mid-tier events with parking for up to 3,000 people, you have fundamentally, and you allow substantial development of the south grazing area that was supposed to be left basically undisturbed. You have changed the fundamental nature of what was proposed when the voters were asked to approve this annexation agreement. And I am extremely disappointed after having read the PCDC's minutes and read the staff's reports that neither the Planning Commission members nor the staff even acknowledged what happened in 2017 and the representations were made and what the public relied on when they voted. And to me, it is a serious matter when you go to the public and ask them to vote on something based on certain conditions that were discussed considerably at the time, that this was going to be mostly an undeveloped gateway from the north to Lyons. And 5 years later, you're back and essentially gut that annexation agreement and fundamentally change what you told voters you were going to do. To me, when you make representations to voters, and or you being Planet Bluegrass and the town as well, those are to be taken seriously. In the same vein, 8 months ago, as my exchange with Mr. Tucker suggested, the concept of a mid-tier event was brought up for the first time and added, it didn't exist before then, and added to what Planet Bluegrass could do, specifically to let them do more things at the ranch. And the whole concept of a mid-tier event was exactly what we talked about in the question and answers. It was, how big can an event be and be self-contained at the ranch, where you didn't have people parking in town streets, you didn't have people parking at the farm. That was the concept behind a mid-tier event. And now that concept is being turned on its head, and a mid-tier event is tripling in size, and it not self-contained at the ranch anymore. These to me are major concerns. There are other things here that to me need more clarification to vote on. The whole ADU thing, again, I'm kind of flabbergasted that the Planning Commission and the town staff in the cover memo would use the term ADU in a capitalized form and make references to, you can't use an ADU as an accessory dwelling unit, and never even tell the board or the public if they really meant it was an ADU or not. And nobody even addressed $30,000 plus of fees that determine whether this is an ADU or not. And I still don't think on the record that that's been clarified. And part of the clarification is the provision in the annexation agreement, which said that the town would basically waive a wastewater connection fee. Why would we do that? We rarely do that. And the answer was given was they didn't anticipate connecting to the sewer system, but now they do anticipate connecting to the sewer system. And so does that provision come out of the agreement or not? That to me is uncertain. Part of the process of approving this kind of a complicated deal is this board repeatedly relies on the utilities engineering board to dig into the details of complicated utilities issues that none of us on the board are really experts on. And there's a problem with the process that has been done with this. And the UEB's contribution was essentially, we need a full engineering report at the time building permits are suggested. Well, wait a minute. The Utilities and Engineering Board serves as an advisory board like the EAB does to the Board of Trustees. It doesn't have a role to play in the building permit process. It doesn't advise the town staff who handles building permits. So when the board gets presented with complicated, difficult issues like this, we need advice and recommendations from the UEB, just like we got from the Ecology Advisory Board. I want to commend for a thorough study of this. We didn't get it from the UEB, and I would like to have more UEB advice on this. I also think that this magnitude of proposed changes to Planet Bluegrass's operations, particularly when they are accompanied by the usual representations, this is going to have great economic benefits for the town, and property tax and sales tax were mentioned in Mr. Strom's report. I think now is the time that we ought to try to discuss with Planet Bluegrass a municipal services impact fee instead of a camping, a lodging tax on camping, which has always caused problems and was never really. We should delink those from now that we have a hotel coming. But here's the problem with all those uncertain things: the quasi-judicial process and prohibitions against ex parte talks with even town staff don't allow us to sit down and try to reach compromises on these things or get more information. We can't even ask questions of each other or town staff or the applicants. And where that leaves me is I don't want to vote no to this whole thing. That's not my intent, because I think within all these uncertainties and changes in use, if we could do what we did with the 2021 agreement and try to find some middle grounds, including taking into consideration the comments of the public, that we could probably get something I could support. And so my preference would be to take a little more time and see if we can come to some clarification on things like the utilities, fees, and connections, and maybe take a chance at talking about the municipal impact fee, which I think potentially benefits Planet Bluegrass more than anybody, so they don't end up paying $10 per night lodging taxes on camping. So where I end up on this overall, and including this particular item in front of us, is my position is not really so much no on all this. It is, I'm not ready to vote yes, and the legally necessary process that led us to this point hasn't allowed me to gather enough information and try to reach understandings on some issues of disagreement that I really can't vote yes tonight, but I don't really want to vote a no. So if I've got to vote yes or no tonight, my vote is no, but my intent is, I think there's some things that can be worked out and clarified, and I would prefer to delay votes until we've had a chance to sit down and clarify the utilities issues in particular, and see if we can discuss some of these things with Planet Bluegrass and maybe come up with compromises. But that's where I come out. So my preference would be essentially to take some more time before we reach a final decision on these. And I know, let me just add real quickly, I know that's a problem for Planet Bluegrass. They need to know whether they're going to sell tickets or not. But in that regard, some of these issues were broached last April and May, when Trustee Rogan and I were negotiating what led to the agreement approved in June. And we said, basically, that's got to be the subject of another process, a conditional use process, and public hearings and so forth. That was in April and May. The date on all these applications is November 29th, right after Thanksgiving. The date the referrals went out to all the referral agencies was December 22nd, right at Christmas. And here it is, February 23rd. And originally the idea is somebody wanted us to decide this on February 9th. We, the board, didn't control that timing. We're basically being asked for a quick turnaround with holidays, with the Omicron thing hampering staff during December and stuff. It's too quick, and I'm sorry it puts Planet Bluegrass in a bind, but we weren't in control of the timing. Planet Bluegrass was more in the control of the timing than we were. And I think I need more time before I can vote yes. And so forced to vote now, I'd have to vote no. But I think there's an agreement to be reached somewhere. I just don't think it's there in the record as it exists right now.
Further comments? Trustee Rogan?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I feel similarly. I think having gone through the process of negotiations with Planet Bluegrass this summer, I think we know that we can reach middle ground, and we can, we all bring the best of intentions to the table when we do negotiate. So I have a question, and I understand the bind that Planet Bluegrass is in because they need to rehome these folks. So is there a way that we would be able to give Planet Bluegrass a waiver or something for 600 people to camp at the farm so that they can rehome those campers from Riverbend while we go through the process of negotiation?
It would still require amendments to the conditional use. And so, amendments to the keynotes. And so we'd still have to approve a conditional use. It wouldn't be as expansive as the one that has been proposed, but we could say for 1 year, they get 600 people at the farm. I assume that you'd mean the north grazing area.
I do, yeah.
And then, and then we'd have to revisit this next year, essentially. That would be an option, but it's certainly not being proposed. It would just be taking out all the red lines and putting in a new one, allowing camping on the north grazing area for 600 additional people.
I wonder if the rest of the board has appetite for that while we work through the other issues that Mayor Pro Tem brought up.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Is we couldn't fit 600 more people on the north area, that they're maxed out with parking and camping now. Is that, or maybe I've got that wrong.
Yeah, so right now, the existing one pre-red lines, it would be 1,200 people in the north grazing area. And then the proposal is to reduce that to 950 and then increase parking from 150 to 400. And so obviously you can't both increase parking and campers. Something has to give.
Some of those, some of those numbers got screwed up somehow. There's inconsistencies between the cover thing and what's in the red line. And that's another thing I'm not certain about. One of them says 900 and one of them says 750, and I'm not sure which is right. I haven't had time to sort it all out, but I mean, I think that's a good suggestion that Trustee Rogan made. If physically you can accommodate enough campers on the north grazing area to deal for them to do what they want to do this summer, I'd be in support of that if we can figure out a way to get there temporarily.
Zach does have his hand raised. I don't know if you want to notice him or not.
This is I notice it, but this is a board discussion at this time.
I know. I just thought maybe he could answer that quick question.
He'll have an opportunity. I don't know whether I can support the item before us until the questions that I had in regard to ecology are answered sufficiently by the experts. I don't know how long that's going to take, but I have major concerns about that, as does Trustee Lowell, I imagine. So I would have a difficult time approving structures and camping and a sewer line and, a water line under the river, until I know that it's practical and acceptable and, couldn't hurt the ecology of the area in discussion. That's my comment. Any further comments by the board? Trustee Miller?
I just have a clarifying question for Attorney Dittman, and excuse me because I'm extraordinarily tired at this point. Is there a way that we could just continue with the same process that we've been going through now? With these same documents continuing forward, but just putting some sort of contract in the mix for this 1 year. Similarly, what Trustee Brogan was asking for the keynotes, but not changing the keynotes specifically, just putting a supplemental piece in there for this year.
I think the problem is we would create a conflict with the existing keynotes, which provides pretty strict limitations on camping, for example. And so we'd still have to change the keynote in some way, either to create a new section saying for the purposes of, year 2022, these will be increased at a certain level, or just change the keynote to reflect that new level. Either way, it still requires a conditional use process because It's very clear in the keynotes that we can't change them without a conditional use. So we'd still be here, or we can't engage in a separate process and to change those limitations without either changing them now, or a continuation of this process, or denying that's before us, negotiating, and then coming back with a joint proposal with a subsequent conditional use, which would require another PCDC hearing and another Board of Trustees hearing.
Any additional comments? In regard to Trustee Rogan's suggestion, I'll give Zach Tucker an opportunity to respond to the possibility of that suggestion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify it from our perspective to, if a one-year deal was worked out for this to allow us to continue moving forward on discussions, we would need the approval for the 600 campers in the south grazing area. Moving them to the north, as I kind of expressed when I was discussing with Mayor Pro Tem Browning, we're already at maximum capacity up on the north side. So moving campers there costs us parking. And so we can't really make that trade. So a one-year deal on the south grazing area for that 600 campers is reasonable. But we would also want to request the bridge be allowed to be put in and the fence so that we can keep the promises around our half of the deal, if that makes sense. Some of those, luckily, those are the lowest impact of all the structures we're requesting, but those two pieces would be important for us to be able to manage that correctly as we've promised.
Thank you. Any further questions? Madam Clerk?
Trustee Waugh had his hand raised, sir.
Excuse me, I didn't see you, Trustee Waugh, sir.
I was just going to say I'm in favor of a deal to allow camping this year, and agree with my colleagues that there's way too much for us to decide with regard to everything else. And I think the outline that Mr. Tucker just outlined would be something that I could support. And I think that we should move to quickly allow some type of camping to at least make them whole for this season as we work through the other details in preparation for 2023.
And just for my edification, how many campers were you talking about on the southern grazing area, Zach?
Our original request was for 1,000, but to rehome the Riverbend campers, 600 would do the trick.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion.
I don't think I heard a motion.
Oh, I thought there was.
We had an initial motion.
There was an original motion and a couple of amendments already.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Dolores. Was there a motion though to
approve? Yes, the motion to approve was moved by Trustee Rogan, seconded by Trustee Waugh.
Correct, but I'm asking about this. I assume that we're wanting to vote on this new idea of just getting rid of everything, but changing Keynote 5 essentially to allow 600 campers on the south grazing area. I don't know if I heard
no motion for that yet.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I can move for that if you'd like.
It's up to the board. I'm just trying to keep score here.
Trustee Rogan.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we replace Keynote 5, allowing 600 campers on the south grazing area, and also allowing the construction of a temporary pedestrian bridge and a fence.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second as stated. Any comments?
I have a question concerning that, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Actually, it's probably for Brandon. With this motion, is this a motion as an amendment to the original motion to pass the resolution 2022-19?
Yeah, so I think in order to enact,
do we need to add that we need to strike everything else from 2022-19?
Yeah, we're going to need an additional motion
Or
after
can I ask Ms. Rogan or Trustee Rogan to do that or add that to that?
You can, yes.
Trustee Rogan?
Sure, do what Trustee Harava said, strike everything else.
The
Keynote 5.
one change I would make to that is that the blue highlights you see in the red line were things meant to ratify what was done in the settlement agreement. And so I think we'd want to keep all the blue text. So I think
Correct. That's probably true, and I'll consider this a second for all that too.
Trustee Lowell.
So if we expunge everything out of there except Keynote 5, does that mean that the fence that was to be constructed around the residence to separate the yard from the other property uses, which in fact has already been built, has to be torn down?
it would be in violation of the keynotes, yes. So it'd be a breach of contract essentially.
Administrator Simonson.
Could I suggest that we not purge everything from that resolution and put it on the shelf while we do these negotiations? And instead, why don't we just draft a new one to adopt by consent on March 7th?
So I guess the question I would have with that is that we can start, the board can make a decision and then we can bring it back for ratification, certainly.
Yes.
With these motions in place, and then I think what I envisioned is staff would come back with here's what we believe the board said, please ratify this.
But if we're only going to adopt Keynote 5, why not? Why don't we just do a separate resolution with that to get us through now? Can't do
We
it?
can't, because it requires a conditional use process. And so if you were to vote this down and start over, you'd have to go back to PCDC, back to Board of Trustees, redo a legal notice. I think the easiest thing to do if we want to make that change would be to do it now, and in accordance with the way the Board of Trustees has recommended. And probably what we would do is bring it back for ratification with a final at the next meeting, where the board can review what we have drafted in response to their motion and they can ratify it. I think that's what makes sense, but it's up to the Board of Trustees, of course, to determine the course of action.
Trustee Rogan.
And then, so just so that I'm sure I have this right. So let's say that we do go through this process, we ratify it, and then does the planet have to go through the entire conditional use process again?
Yes.
Do they have to pay all the fees again associated with it?
Yes. It'd be a new application. I mean, the board could waive those fees potentially if it wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But that'd be a future board's determination, not this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe we have, don't we have an amendment on the table, Counselor?
I think Mayor Pro Tem has his hand raised.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Following up on Trustee Rogan's question, is there not a way for the board to suspend or continue the date on the rest of the requests, not turn them down tonight, but continue to a date certain the remainder of those things that we would, rather than just striking them, but basically hold them in abeyance and approve just the things we just talked about, and so that they don't have to start over? I don't want them to have to start over.
You could, but I think what you suggested earlier, Mayor Pro Tem, there'd be some sort of negotiation.
Right.
The board couldn't engage. We couldn't commit a subcommittee to engage in that negotiation. It would violate the quasi-judicial process where it has to be an open public meeting deciding all these things. If we're making decisions behind the scenes, that's very much flies in the due process rights of anyone who objects to this in its entirety.
We've concluded the public hearing, at least on this one. We couldn't put the rest of it in abeyance and come back and have a second public hearing.
You certainly could on the rest of them, or I mean, the problem is we can't do a negotiation on these items now. They've been noticed and opened. Staff you could give direction to staff, say, go bring this back. We have to reopen everything. potentially. But what I heard you say is that you'd like to have, like kind of what we did with the settlement agreement, have a subcommittee sit down, negotiate these things out. That's just not going to work with the requirements of the conditional use process.
Could we direct staff to try to negotiate these provisions now that they've heard, some board feedback?
We could, and we'd have to reopen the public hearing to address the new information.
I'm just searching for whether it's not fair to Planet Bluegrass or the public either, for that matter, to have to go through or Pcdc to have to go through all these things again. If we could do that would be my preference, to direct staff, since we're, I guess, legally prohibited from doing it as board members, to try to negotiate a proposed agreement on the things that have been outlined tonight, bring that back to the board. And I guess we can make amendments when it comes back to the board. We can reopen a public hearing too. That would be my preference. I don't like starting over again.
I think if we were to bring back a new keynote draft and other changes, we'd have to reopen the public hearing regardless. There's be new information presented.
And that's fine. Reopen. We probably should, because there may be different things that the public might want to comment. I don't have a problem with that. So that's a lot less onerous on everybody than restarting the process. So if that's possible, that would be my suggestion. We could vote on this and then direct the staff to try to negotiate and clarify. Part of it's just clarification, the points that have been raised, and then reopen a public hearing, and the board then decide on what the staff puts in front of us.
Yeah, I think that's the direction the board wants to take. We'd have to vote down the current amendment and then continue after that. Is it then? There's still a motion to approve this, so we'd have to do a motion. We have to vote down the amendment, which is to basically take out all the red lines and make this new 600 person South grazing area concept, and then we'd continue to a date certain that would allow staff to go back and basically try again on this, and then have another public hearing. We should open from start at the Board of Trustees level, and then go from there.
This amendment would just temporarily approve the 600 camping, ratify also the 2021 stuff. You wanted that part of it, and there was one other aspect of it. So if we approve that amendment, then by further amendment, could we basically put the rest of it, defer decision on the rest of it pending staff negotiations, I guess is my suggestion.
No, I think you have to continue the whole thing, because there's a motion to approve, which is holistic. You couldn't bifurcate it really. There's only one resolution. There's only one resolution to approve here. I think if you were to approve the 600 on the north grazing area via amendment, and then approve the resolution as a whole as amended, it would end that conditional use process. And you have to, whatever additional edits would have to come in a separate process. I think the options really are to continue it and just try again and open a new public hearing, or do a 1-year fix, or how many month fix by disapproving that section 5 change.
So
Trustee Miller?
We could continue the whole thing to a date certain.
Certainly, always.
And between now and whatever date we continued it to.
Can I just point something out here?
Go ahead, Trustee Miller.
I would just like to point out that I think that this whole document that they are asking for, that we just went through, is like the biggest case scenario, right? Like long-term, what they say, 10 years? Did you say 10 years? 10-year plan, right? I think that if we approve this tonight, it's not all going to happen overnight. It's not, it's going to, they're still going to have to get through building permits. Am I correct, Attorney Dittman?
building
permits,
permits, flood permits, whatever.
flood permits, but, ecology permits or studies, all sorts of different barriers, right, to get this vision accomplished. So I feel like if it's going to be this huge of a deal for them to, for all of us, for everybody to go through again to get this far, maybe we should just approve this tonight the way it is. And then as time goes on and they have to go through these other processes, it will weed out what they can't, what doesn't make sense. I mean, I've seen the operations and how they operate, and I know that they're not going to cram as many people in there as they can. I don't think I've ever been had any traffic issues or anything like that. In fact, my mother lives at Eagle Canyon. In Eagle Canyon, it's actually easier to get out because there's a flagger standing there out of that neighborhood a lot of the times. So I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that this is a big picture, and maybe it's so hard to redo this that we look at it long term.
Trustee Wong.
I have to apologize to the applicant and to the rest of my colleagues. I can no longer be on this phone call due to health issues. I need to finish this call. So I wish us best of luck in figuring this out tonight, and I'll join and follow up when I can.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Rogan.
Trustee Wall's absence, I'd like to.
Excuse me,
You
Mayor
haven't
Pro
been
Tem.
recognized.
I'm sorry.
I recognize Trustee Rogan.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. Thank you. I wonder if it would be possible for the applicant to submit a conditional use review request for simply the 600 campers separately. If we tonight decide to vote no on this whole amendment, is there a way to expedite that, a process of a conditional use just for the 600 campers and the bridge and the fence?
They certainly could, we could deny this and they could submit a new application. It'll still require to go through the entire process. So as required by the code, which would require referrals and a PCDC hearing. And we would certainly, it'd be much easier to do certainly than the current proposal. So one would think that it would be quicker to process. We wouldn't have to do, multiple Board of Trustees meetings. For example, if we're not amending the annexation agreement, it wouldn't require a first and second reading. It would just be, really one item, which is the conditional use on the farm property, keynotes and site plan.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it is most effective to adopt the resolution as is, expunging everything but keynote 5 or whatever the number was.
Mayor Pro Tem, you wanted to be recognized.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. Sorry, it's late.
Yeah, I was wondering if we, with respect to this amendment, if we couldn't just simply continue this whole thing, particularly with Trustee Juan not being able to continue for a week or whatever date we can find, hold it as it is, and direction to staff or not, staff and the applicant can talk in the meantime. And when we come back, see how many of these things we could have gotten resolved. And that might let us approve the whole thing with some modifications. And the mayor had suggested that anyway. It's 10:45. One of our members has had to leave. Could we defer this for a week and see how many of these things could be clarified and potentially compromised in some way, and vote on the whole thing maybe a week from now somehow?
So Counselor, before we consider that, there's been an amendment and a second to that amendment on the table. So to do what the Mayor Pro Tem suggested, we would have to ask both the mover of that amendment to withdraw it, sir. Is
In the
that not
motion,
correct?
the mover and the second.
Yep.
To withdraw.
Trustee Rogan,
I would withdraw my amendment.
Trustee Caravas,
And if I don't, no, I'm just kidding. Yes, that's fine.
We have to vote on it.
That is fine.
and now how about the suggestion by the Mayor Pro Tem? I agree with it 100%.
And I would put that in the form of a motion that we continue this to a date certain, and we need to discuss the date and add that date later to allow the staff, particularly the town attorney, who's probably has to do the most drafting on this, to see what can be done, and then the staff on the substantive parts of it to see what could come back to us by that date. And with the, that would include the concept of temporary approval if necessary.
Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Counselor, you wanted to interject something?
I just want to make sure that, this meeting, we didn't have Philip. So we want to make sure we have Philip's availability, Aaron's availability, my availability, and Victoria's availability, as well as Planet Bluegrass's availability. So that way we got all the people we need to be in the room. I think as complicated as this is, it really does require a full team.
Does it require a date certain, Counselor?
It always requires a date certain.
That's what I thought. So that's what we're going to have to discuss as well. Do we do that after we vote on the motion, or does that have to be part of the motion?
It needs to be part of the motion. So we need to put that now.
Madam Administrator, Town Clerk, do you have any suggestions? You know about the staff and when they're available.
Can we not do it back-to-back days on board meeting?
Mercy. I'll agree with you there.
We have one more tomorrow. Let's see. I do have access to Philip's calendar, but it will take me a minute. Can you throw out some dates you might be suggesting? The 7th is our regular meeting. There is a big community-wide comp plan on March 9th with, a community plan March 9th. So.
Can we do the 1st?
I don't think we could, that's.
That's a week away. 2nd.
When is Phil back?
Oh, he'll be back Monday.
The 2nd's a week from now.
We have, you have a concern. I mean, if we're going to start at 7 p.m. again.
No, let's do it earlier.
I have a conflict that night with Consortium of Cities.
March 1st could be an option. If people would be okay with the new, oh no, Zach's saying no, that doesn't work for their side.
Can I offer a thing on our half?
The 3rd?
I'm out of town all of next week, so I'm hoping for ideally something later than probably the 9th to give me time to communicate with staff and all of that. So either ideally after the 9th or the week of the 14th.
What about the potential of the 14th or 15th? The 14th is Planning Commission and Park and Rec. So the 15th is open.
15th.
Okay. 15th.
That works for me. Yeah.
The 15th is Empire's Board of Trustees meeting for me. I mean, I can pass off somebody else if I'm the only one.
What time do they start, Brandon?
6:30. I have another attorney that can cover it though.
Can we do 5?
I'm gonna check Philip's.
7 is late. I'm in bed by like 8:30.
So what do we have?
We're up to the 15th right now, except that Brandon has another
Yeah, if I'm the only one, don't worry about it. I can have another attorney cover it.
You mean cover Empire?
Yeah, cover it, not cover this one. Empire's got a lot less going on.
What about the
No
14th?
disrespect to Empire.
So we have,
14th is Monday, right?
Planning Commission and Park and Rec.
yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
Park
So-
and Rec, I'm okay. I'm okay with coming to this meeting instead.
Yeah, 15th works if I'm the only one, so we'll make it work.
All right, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Time? What does
Six.
the board prefer?
where's Empire?
It's about Winter Park.
Oh,
Are we
They
gonna
have
start?
they have a brewery and a wastewater treatment plant with issues. So.
Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Can we start at 6?
yes, please earlier.
yes. I mean, we're gonna continue with the rest of the agenda, are we not, Counselor? Not just
Tonight?
this resolution.
We'll have to continue all of the items.
That's what
I
I
mean,
thought.
we'll have to open them and continue them.
Okay,
Then let's start at 5.
I just, you know what I have a hard time with that early is the public participation. And I know some people don't care about that.
It's a
But,
computer.
a lot of
You
people-
Get on a phone.
A lot of people are still working and on their way home, so I don't mind 6. I think 6 is reasonable.
When we're
that a-
discussing stuff like this, it takes forever. I can't be up this late. It doesn't work for me.
Well, I don't think if we start at 6 that it'll
We
be.
started at 7 and we could be talking until 3 a.m. on this. If we kept going.
Yep. What is the pleasure of the board, Mayor Pro Tem?
To clarify my pending motion, it would be to continue this to March 15th at 6 p.m.
Is there a second?
I second that.
We have the motion and several seconds. Any comment? If not, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
and Trustee Carabas.
Aye.
This agenda and the items on it are continued to the date certain stated on the record. Is there any other business to attend to?
Yeah.
Counselor?
Mayor Angela, we just continued the first item. We still need to go through the other ones and continue all of them, open them and continue them.
We have to have a motion to continue the rest, in other words.
Correct.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So moved. I move we continue the rest of the items to the March 15th at 6 p.m.
And I will second that.
We have a motion and a second as stated. Any comments? I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Carabas,
Aye.
and Trustee Lowell.
Aye.
Any additional business?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
You may, sir.
Based on the statements made earlier by Mayor Pro Tem Browning and followed by Holly and even Trustee Rogan and Trustee Wall, and I felt the same way that want to vote yes, but we couldn't vote, but perhaps vote no just on 2022-19. All the things that were stated and the reasons why in the testimony from residents and things. What specifically is staff going to work out with? So basically, I guess it's, kind of what are they going to be working on? So we're all on the same page.
You want me to go through that?
Simonton, yep.
It'll, first we'll start with the situation with the ADUs to redefine that if it's an accessory to the primary, not an ADU.
And what the utility impacts will be.
And the utility impacts. I'm immediately going to address the shipping containers in the floodplain. The fence around the house, we're going to have to probably take a look at that. I need a little more information on that and where it's at in conjunction with the floodplain as well. So we have ADU. Probably a discussion about the size of mid-tier events. Coming up with, looks like you want me to touch base with the assessor regarding ag zoning to commercial improvements. Property line. Oh, the sewer connection. Let's see. We'll discuss sewer connection again. I got lots of notes here. So,
EAB comments.
oh yeah, definitely all the environmental concerns that were expressed.
Could we have a cover sheet on the contradictions between the proposal and the original annexation agreement, please?
I mean, I guess we have a red line. There's a red line of the annexation agreement in the packet, so that should show.
Is that all of them?
Ours.
Okay.
And then, just give me a second. There's a lot to read.
Mayor Pro
I think
Tem,
that's
do
the
you have
big
anything?
one. And then, let's see.
I believe the Mayor Pro Tem brought up also, as we heard from in the public
Oh, and then-
comments, the original with the lights and traffic and
Yep, the
all the
concerns.
original agreements. I just want to make sure that Trustee Rogan and Mayor Pro Tem get their answers.
Yep, the commitments to the previous group. And my guess is that Philip wasn't here at the time all that happened, and I should have caught that in the report. We certainly talked about it, but it didn't make it into the report. So that should be there.
The easement for the sewage connection needs to be in the next agenda as well.
Oh, I thought we did include that
It's
too. The
supposed to be.
2017 easement agreement.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, is there anything I'm missing?
We can't the board members collectively or individually can't negotiate with Planet Bluegrass. I get that. Could I suggest that the staff and Planet Bluegrass in the meantime discuss perhaps, number one, a good faith undertaking to try to negotiate a municipal impact fee? I don't think that could be included. I don't think you need to resolve that as part of this, but it could be a condition that they enter into good faith negotiations. Is that acceptable, Brandon?
There could certainly be something that a commitment to negotiate after the fact. I don't think we can implement that in this agreement just because the tax still exists, and so until it goes away, we do double taxation.
It's just to enter into good faith negotiations, and they may or may not work, but I'm confident something eventually. And secondly, to discuss with them the total number of events there. I'm not suggesting any outcome, but just to discuss if there's any room for compromise on total number of events.
And then Trustee Rogan, you had another item we missed?
It's not an item that anybody missed because we didn't get a chance to bring it up, but the end time for weekdays, that moving to 10 o'clock, I think is problematic for folks with kids and, folks who actually need to get some sleep, because the truth is that the sound doesn't end, right when the music ends. So I would offer that as a point of negotiation too.
Anything else? We're settled? No additional business? If not, I'll certainly entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have
I'll
a
second
second?
Second.
Okay, we have 3 seconds. I'm sure there'll be no discussion. We'll call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Miller.
Yay.
This meeting is adjourned. Stay safe, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you for hanging in there, Zach.
Hey,
Good night.
Zach.
Stay warm.
Hey, Zach.
Good night.
If you're gone the first week of March,
Yes, I could get something on that Monday if you're around. Monday.
That's the only day, because that's the day Philip's back, so we have one day to negotiate all this.
No, we have a whole week after that.
No, packet will be, no, we're meeting, oh, you're right. 14th. We have one more week. Okay, great. All right,
We
but
could
let's try
preliminary.
to, let's get together sooner than later on this.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
I'll shoot you an email tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.